Oh, you're gonna have to get closer, though.
I'm not quite ready. All right, what is this? Good evening. I'm going to call to order the meeting, Wolfeboro ZBA, May 2nd, 2022. Roll call, we have Luke Freudenberg. Sabette Stroman is with us digitally or electronically here on this iPad. Sarah Silk, Suzanne Ryan, Vice Chair. I'm Audrey Klein, I'm the Chair. Tim Cronin,
Here.
Clerk. Alternate, Sabette Stroman is an alternate, and Kate McMullen
Yes.
is an alternate, and Chuck Sumner is an alternate. So we've got a full contingency of board members tonight. And Tavis Austin, the town planner. Before I open the public hearing, I would like to take a look at the agenda and have a discussion about the order of the items. Attorney Walker, we might be conversing on this, but let's start out and see how far we get. So I would like to talk about several of the variances. Anybody else have anything to say about the order or the variances? Sarah?
I will after you present what you have.
I went through the packet and I found that it was beneficial to take all of the variances listed for the area that is lot 116, 15, and 16 and put them together because those two lots, according to the plan, might be joined together. Then the other three, that takes care of 4 variances, and the other 3 variances have to do with the other lot, which is 175-11, and I found it was easier to just take everything to do with the manufactured homes in one spot and everything to do with the apartment buildings in the other, rather than jump. On the agenda, it's trailers, apartments, trailer, apartments, apartments, trailers, and it's kind of confusing to keep hopping from one item to another in that fashion, in my opinion.
Okay. I would like to speak to several of these. Let's start off with case number 5, V22, lot with no frontage. Application requires a variance.
That's also what I had a question about or concern about. They're asking for a variance, lots with no frontage, and our ordinance is specifically for a special exception, not a variance. We cannot act on a variance. We don't have the authority to act on a variance. The statute is 674-41. It's a state statute, and there's a couple of things that apply. Lots with no frontage, they have to have a deeded right-of-way to a private way or lot with frontage, and or have come from a subdivision plat. Also, that what's interesting is that lots eligible for relief under this section shall be deemed ineligible for subdivision under the lot's current configuration. So that they still would have that hurdle to go through. At any rate, they've asked for a variance. The statute quite clearly states they have to have a deed for the right-of-way, and we statutorily do not have the authority to give a variance when it's established that we are to give a special exception. We don't, and vice versa. If someone came in for a special exception, we can't do a variance, and so this is out of order.
I'm not 100% sure about that. I think you can ask for a variance from any section of the zoning, perhaps even to a special exception.
Well, I have
but
it right
that's-
here. It's right here in our trustee handbook that,
In your microphone, please.
oh, okay. Oh, shoot, where's the first page? 6. Under the authority of the Board of Adjustment has the power to grant those exceptions that are clearly specified in the zoning ordinance. A variance is permissible granted to the use of a specific piece of property, is more flexible manner than allowed by the ordinance. A special exception is a specific permitted land use that is allowed when clearly defined criteria and conditions are contained in the ordinance, which it is. Specifically, the town did adopt a zoning ordinance for backlots.
No, I understand that part. My other question is not going to be answered tonight because I don't think we're going to go down that road. But nevertheless, at some point, I would like to know whether you can get a variance to not have to do a special exception. I think it's an interesting question.
Audrey,
Will
can
not be answered tonight. Yes,
Audrey, can you
Sarah?
talk into the microphone, because I can't hear you
Okay.
when you turn your
I
head.
sound loud to me, but I'll try to get a little closer.
Well, if you read,
Suzanne, we're not going to answer that question tonight. and
well, it's answered right here in your own ordinance.
Well, I think that's a matter of argument, which we don't have to have tonight, because it's not going to make any difference to this, in my opinion. And I'll tell you why.
Oh, great.
Okay. As I was reading through this variance application, because it is what Attorney Walker has created a new group of variances called housekeeping variances. But Bartlett versus City of Manchester says, contained in every variance application is the threshold question of whether the applicant's proposed use of the property requires a variance. And this says the applicant's proposed use of the property requires a variance. And this application, as presented with the site plan, clearly shows that those lots will be merged. So that's proposed. They're proposed to be merged. And therefore, I don't think that we can require a variance to be heard, but also the reason people come before the ZBA is because their projects don't match the law or the regulations. Their site doesn't match the regulations. That's the whole reason we're here for a variance. So to require them to somehow make their site fit the ordinance before they move ahead and then make the ordinance fit their site really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Having said all that, if I look at the lots with no frontage section, it actually says, prior to the issuance of a building permit, an owner of a lot exempted under this section must obtain a special exception. That's a long way off for this. It sounds to me like the special exception is not required until a building permit is applied for. And in this case, of course, as far as we know, that will be a moot issue at that point. Would you like to comment to that, Randy? I think you have to turn that on. Nope.
There we go.
There you go.
So I agree with the logic a little bit. It's a chicken and egg problem that we have. We did go to the planning board for conceptual review. We thought we were favorably received. We did go to TRC. We know we have to go back to the planning board if we're successful this evening before the zoning board. So 4 of the variances, I think, will literally go away.
Could we just stick with this one
So
because...
the one variance that you're addressing right now will go away if the planning board allows us to merge lots 15 and 16. I'm just using the numbers for the last digits, 11, 15, 16 for the 3 lots. So it's just a merger. It's automatic. So the planning board can easily merge 15 and 16 together, and my suggestion is that anything that the board may do today, if they're inclined to approve our variances, just make a condition of planning board approval that those lots merge together. And if they are merged, then there is no lot with no road frontage. The problem literally evaporates, which is why I was calling it housekeeping.
Yeah, I think the point of the Bartlett versus City of Manchester is you're proposing something to us, so you're already saying that that's going to happen. We don't need to condition it. Your application has conditioned everything we do on what you said on the site plan, and you did say it was going to be merged. I'm really uncomfortable also, even if this were necessary, and I think due to the case law as well as the section, it isn't. Either granting or denying a variance for this, anything could happen to this project. And that variance may very well still be good after this project doesn't go through, gets purchased by somebody else, the planning board reconfigures it differently. I think it's just, we don't know what the unforeseen consequences of doing something like this would be, even if that's necessary.
Yes, that was going to be one of my points, is that a variance, you know this, travels with the land. It doesn't go away just because you go to the planning board or anywhere else. That variance is going to stick with that parcel or parcels, and
So the suggestion was, though...
it doesn't become moot, it doesn't go away. It's recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and it will be there forever.
Well, again, it's
So-
not problematic if you were to approve
Randy,
a lot with
I
no
think-
frontage,
I
you merge
think-
them together as a condition of approval. We go to the planning board and they say, no, we're not going to merge them, it dies.
I understand.
If they do merge it, then it's not here. We're almost willing to withdraw it. And the only
Well-
reason we're here on it is because the code enforcement officer said we needed to come in on that.
Well, what I would say is I would entertain a motion to determine this case does not meet the threshold for a variance and the section does not require it, and have it removed from the agenda. Or I think you're probably better off having us make that determination rather than withdrawing it, but that's up to you.
My suggestion was that we just continue 4 of them, deal with the 3 meaty ones, the height variance.
We're going to step through those one by one. I only want to deal with one of these at a time because I have other issues with other variances.
I get the idea. All right. So if we could just...
Did your lawyer tell you what he thought?
Our client is suggesting that we don't need to go forward with this variance based on what you're saying. It would not impact the other applications. If that's the case, then we're happy to just continue.
I would tell your client to rely on your guidance and not my guidance.
Fully understand that. My suggestion is that we go forward on the substantive ones and not on variances 1, 2, 3, 4 until the end of the meeting. If we need to address them, let's just address them at the end. But to deal with the substantive ones and getting over...
Okay. Having said that, would anybody care to make a motion that this case does not reach the threshold for a variance and would be removed from the agenda, or are we going to just go with what Attorney Walker said?
I would move that this case doesn't meet the criteria for a variance.
That's not actually my motion.
What did you say?
I said I would entertain a motion to determine that this case does not meet the threshold for needing a variance
Threshold.
and will be removed from the agenda.
That's what I would motion.
Can anybody second that?
I'll second that. Are we going to have discussion?
Is there any discussion?
I would just say that it appears as if that might be the wish of the applicant.
Perhaps, but again, Bartlett versus Manchester says contained in every variance application is the threshold question for the board, whether the applicant's proposed use of the property requires a variance. So, yes, I suppose we could go either way. Any other comments or questions from alternates? You're here to ask questions as well, if you'd like. Or Tim?
So the only concern that I have is that it doesn't affect the other variances. Again, our suggestion is that anything that the board was inclined to approve this evening, that it make it conditioned upon merging those two lots, just as a condition. You put conditions on things all the time, and as do other boards.
So you would like us to hear this variance application?
At the end of the meeting, if we
Okay.
need it.
Well,
If we get through the other
So-
substantive ones, then we don't need it.
So let's move case 5V22 to the last position, Tavis. Okay. You'll let us know when we start moving these things around, what happens? Okay. Thank you. Now, yes?
yeah, so where are we with it? What do you,
This variance is moving to the end of the agenda. They
So-
still would like us to hear the variance, but not till the end of the agenda.
Okay, but you need to withdraw the motion in the second because that's still on the
got to vote
table.
on it?
On,
Withdraw your motion.
on the, okay. All right, so yes, we did have a motion in a second. Luke, do you up or down on whether we remove this from the agenda because we feel that it doesn't rise to the level of needing a variance?
I'd rather see it move to the, like you said, to the end, so I'm going to vote no.
I'll vote no. It could have been easily done by you and Suzanne just asking to withdraw your motion, but that's okay. I'll vote no.
Okay, you?
I vote to withdraw it.
You vote to withdraw it,
From the
okay.
agenda.
Yes, I do too. Tim, you need the microphone.
Move it to the end of the agenda.
Okay, so that's 3 to move it to the end and 2 to withdraw. Okay. Another variance I have a statement about. Number 6, V22, to allow for the construction of 2 multifamily dwelling structures on one parcel. Our application says this is from 175-96, permitted uses. I don't think that's the right section, but in any case, permitted uses, and that says A, one of the following dwelling structures is permitted. Further along in the permitted uses paragraph, you'll see G, and it says multifamily dwellings. If you go to Article 23, multifamily dwellings, and you look under B, density, the last chapter says, so long as the density requirements are met for all units, more than one building may be located on a lot of record. And I believe you stated that the density was met.
So if that is the board's interpretation, I welcome it, I agree with it, and that was going to be one of my arguments as to why you should grant the variance. So that's a perceptive insight, and the only reason we did it again is because the code enforcement officer rejected the application for that reason, so we had to file a variance so we didn't get caught. But I agree
Gotcha.
exactly with your ordinance. I don't think that that variance is necessary because of 144B. And if that's the board's interpretation, we would be delighted to go to the planning board without the necessity of that variance.
So is there any discussion by the board? I would entertain a motion to determine that the proposal meets Section 175-96G and Article 23B, so long as the density requirements are met for all units, and the variance will be removed from the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Luke?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Let's see. I'm not quite done yet, sorry. So as far as ordering the agenda, I I would like to hear what Attorney Walker has called the two regular variances, and for some reason I can't find my in-order paper here. One is for height and one is for units in a building. Those are two regular variances I'd like to hear. And then I would like to hear what I think is the threshold case, the density under the conservation subdivision variance, because I think that the other two cases, 7 and 8, really hinge on my understanding of that section, and right now I don't understand it.
So I agree wholeheartedly with that suggestion, and Sarah's earlier, that if we do variance 9 and 10, which is the height and the 45 units in a 5-unit building, those two together, they're both in the Pine Hill District, dispense with that, then go to the density issue in the residential zone, which is your variance number 11, and then leave until the end your variances 7 and 8, if we need them at all. And I think that if we are favorably received on 11, that becomes sort of moot. And if we just push those to the end, but that would be my suggestion going forward, to deal with those substantive ones and
Okay.
see how we fare.
So the agenda looks like case number 10, case number 9, case 11, case 7, case 8, and that first one, which was number 5 at the end.
My suggestion is 9, 10, 11, 7, 8, 5, but you switched 9 and 10, but I would have just done 9 first. That's the height.
Sure, that's fine. So
Okay.
we go 9, 10, 11, 7, 8, and 5.
Perfect.
I just want to take a minute and see if our alternate that's electronic is able to hear us.
And I'm lost. Where did 9, 10, and 11 come from?
Okay, case number 10 is the number of units per building when they're only allowed 5, and
And
they're,
what number is it on here? on our agenda?
it's case number 10.
We get 7.
Yeah, I know, but it's called case 10 V22.
Oh, you're using the case number,
Yep,
not the agenda's number.
correct.
All right, so let me see, case number 10 is number what on the agenda?
The agenda's not
F.
numbered.
F.
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 F or, everybody's using different, I use numericals, Tavis used letters. Now
So-
we're
so
using
with-
case numbers.
10.
It would be E, F, G,
Is E, last one on the bottom.
C, D, A. If you use the letters from the agenda.
It is kind of confusing, because then Randy had a set of numbers, 1 to
And I was
7, too.
adapting to you, but I tried to make it as fluid as I could. One of the problems is we don't get a procedural discussion with this board before tonight, and so it's always tough. But
So just because I knew we would all be using different agendas, I just used the case numbers. So everything I read is the case number.
And I'm sorry to make you do it again.
That's
But now
okay.
that I know you're using case numbers, I'm going to correspond it to A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay. Actually, I have it too. So this is case number 5, this is case number 6, 7, 8, 9, and these are the order that I thought we were going to do them in.
with the goal of doing the height one first. The height one is
Oh,
the first.
right.
D is 8.
See, that's case 9.
I know I'm going to get mixed up.
So are you able to move ahead, just working one at a time?
And what are these numbers here?
That's the order that I was going to put them in. And we've already dispensed with that, so it's no good to you.
Go ahead, I'll catch up if I don't.
Thank you.
It's too bad that this is so messed up.
Yep. So the order of business tonight is the clerk will read the first notice and report on the public notice and personal notice was given, and our voluntold secretary will tell us about the minutes from the site visit. Any board member that needs to recuse themselves can do it then, and an alternate will be seated. A quorum of the board is 3 members. I will then open the public hearing. The applicant will present their case. The board members will ask questions and discuss the case with the applicant. The members of the public will be invited to speak for or against and have chance for rebuttal. If you wish to speak, please come to the microphone, identify yourself, and name and address all comments to the board. And please contain your input to the criteria that we need to evaluate. And if you've heard other people say the same thing, you can just say, I agree with him or her, so that we cannot have a lengthy hearing. After the public hearing comments are finished, we'll close the public hearing and deliberate amongst the board, and in many cases, make a decision tonight. So, clerk,
Ready?
would you mind reading the first case?
First case is Jordy Hutchinson and Michelle Hanson, Richard F. Quimby Jr., Revocable Living Trust, Pine Hill Road, tax map number 175-11, case number 09V22, public hearing for a variance under Article 15, Section 175-95B of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to allow for a variance for building height. Formal submission for this public hearing has been presented.
Does anybody need to recuse themselves from this hearing on the board? Oh, okay, good. Attorney Walker?
Excuse me, Audrey. I
Yep.
need to
Oh, I'm sorry.
do the site
Our
visit.
voluntold secretary needs to report.
Yeah. I will read this just once because all were viewed at the same time. It seems redundant to read it for each one.
Okay.
Site visit minutes 5/2/22, tax map lots 16115, 16116, 17511, cases 5V22, 6V22, 7V22, 8V22, 9V22, 10V22, and 11V22. Present ZBA members, Audrey Klein Chair, Suzanne Ryan Vice Chair, Tim Cronin Clerk, Sarah Silk, Luke Freudenberg, ZBA alternates Kate McMahon, Chuck Sumner, applicant's attorney Randy Walker, Jordy Hutchinson, Michelle Hanson, Conservation Commission, Lenore Clark Chair, Brenda Jorrit, Jim Knupp. Interested parties, Mel Bodgett, Fred Fernald. The site visit started at 4:30 p.m. at an access point to Lot 175-11 adjacent to 109 Pine Hill Road. The applicant stated they were proposing on-site sewer managed by the town and town water. Wetlands shown on the map in the packet were done by previous owner, and the new wetlands delineation is nearly completed. It was unclear as to whether test pits had been dug in the area marked for septic and sewage. The group walked back to the rear corner of the lot. The locations of the 2 apartment buildings were indicated. An orange balloon was observed in the general location of the building to the right. Applicant indicated it was about 50 feet high. Number 2, the group went to a parking area on 109A to observe the entrance to lot 161-15 opposite Beach Pond Road, with applicant stating the New Hampshire DOT would determine the exact location. The first unit would be 320 feet from the street. Number 3, the group parked opposite the Sugar Hill entrance. Applicant indicated the fire chief had asked for an emergency entrance in case 109A or the access road to 161-15 and 16 were blocked. It would be gated and locked with Knox box access for the fire department. Questions were asked about location due to the water at the edge of the road and observed steepness of the lot. The applicant responded the location would be determined based on the wetland survey. Respectfully submitted, Sarah Silk, member.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Randy Walker. I work for Walker & Varney in Wolfeboro, New Hampshire. I'm here tonight representing two locals, Jordy Hutchinson and Michelle Hanson, who are both born in Wolfeboro and work in Wolfeboro. We're also here tonight with Chris Berry from Berry Surveying and Engineering to handle any of the technical aspects of the project and any questions that you may have regarding that area, regarding the application. What I'd like to do is make a general overview presentation and then get into the variances, so I only have to do that once rather than going before each one to try to give the board an overview. I think that's most expeditious for the board, the applicant, and everybody that's here tonight. It's a little unusual to submit 7 variances, but there's really only 3 that are substantively important to us tonight, and hopefully the others will go away at the end. It's a chicken-egg problem that we have. Again, if we'd gone to the planning board first, I think what I called variances 1, 2, 3, 4, we wouldn't need this evening, but we do need the 3 substantive ones that we're going to start with. And I'd like to just start at the end, and I have 4 suggested conditions of approval for the board that if you are inclined to approve these, we would welcome you to put these 4 conditions. You could, of course, do whatever you'd like, but we have 4 suggested conditions, which I think give you a flavor for what we're looking for, and if I could just hand these out.
Thank you.
So just to go through those quickly, it is our anticipation that condition 1 would be that the planning board must approve a 3-lot boundary line adjustment. We have 3 lots today. Right now over here, the upper left lot is in the Pine Hill district, has about 46 acres. The middle lot, or lot 16, is about 24 acres. That's the one with no road frontage. And then lot 15 is about 21 acres in the lower right-hand corner. The goal is to have a boundary line adjustment that will merge 15 and 16 together into what I'll call 15A, and that the lot in the Pine Hill Development District will be divided into 2 lots. It's 46.8 acres, be divided into 2 lots equally sized of 23.4 acres. So it's anticipated that that would occur, and we would welcome a condition that suggests that. Same for number 2, that we acknowledge that we have to go to the planning board to get approval for 90 manufactured housing unit sites on the merged lot. Number 3, we understand that we would need town water and sewer, or that it would be qualify as a town municipal and sewer project. And then 3 will represent right up front that the intent on the rentals, that there will be no short-term rentals. This is a long-term rental project only, and we're happy to volunteer that just as sort of a threshold. So there's 3 lots now, and at the end of this project, if all goes well, there will be 3 lots going out the backside, but with that slight reconfiguration. Again, 2 merged, and then 1 would divide. So this project is rather unique because the location is unique. This is one of the biggest properties in the area, and you could see from the site visit that you walked almost 840 feet in before you would get to the first building, and then we walked past that to the back boundary line, and there's a good amount of land past that project on the backside. These 2 lots to the right, which will be merged together into a 45-acre piece, are also one of the biggest in the area, if not the largest in the area, which makes it rather unique. This is not a small project from a land perspective. We're not dealing with just an acre or 2 acres or 5 acres or 10, but a total of 92 acres that will be divided up. Most of this property, as you can see, is behind commercial properties. It's off Route 109A, behind Winnipesaukee Lumber, behind the SAU, behind GI Plastique, which now goes by PSI Molding. It's behind Wickers now, We Store, behind Eastern Propane. So you've got all these commercial properties in this dark area, and we wrap around it, which puts it remote. One of the nice things is it's out of sight. Much like Sugar Hill, which is just past this project. Sugar Hill is a wonderful development, wonderful addition to Wolfeboro. One of the beauties of it is you can't see it when you drive by. You don't even know it's there. It's invisible. And they've got a massive building up on the top of that hill, much bigger than these buildings that we're proposing, right in the same neighborhood. And again, it's been a nice addition to Wolfeboro. Similarly, Harriman Hill is just before this project on 109, another good-sized residential project that you don't even know that it's there. The entrance road to Harriman Hill has got the town garage on one side. Accidents happen on the right side of the entrance. On the left side, you've got night security, and you've got the Huggins Hospital building. So you drive through commercial properties to get into a residential development. It's working wonderfully. It'll be the same thing here with Winnipesaukee Lumber on the left, now Hancock Lumber, and Pine Hill Storage on the right for the entrance to that main property. So we're trying to do things that have already been done in this area and in the community, and that have worked well. Harriman Hill has got 48 units in there. Birchill Estates, which Sarah and Suzanne and I drive by every day, that's got 106 units. That's bigger than what we're going to propose for these manufactured housing sites on the right side. But we're trying to emulate projects that have already been approved, already exist in Wolfeboro. And the reason we're trying to do it is we have a desperate need for housing in Wolfeboro. Both rental housing, long-term housing. We got a lot of short-term rentals, but we have almost no long-term rentals, and we need housing. And so we've broken this project into two parts: multifamily on the left side, manufactured housing unit park on the right side. The building that we're proposing to go in for the multifamily is on this third picture right here on the right. That building exists in Stowe, Vermont. Right now, it's been so successful, they're building a second one. And that's a tourist community, much like Wolfeboro, that they have there. So this isn't just a conceptual building, it's a building that's actually up, exists, and is flourishing in Stowe, Vermont. The size of the building at a maximum length is about 267 feet on the packet that we gave you. It's about 77 feet wide, and that's only if it's the larger building. Depending on how many 1 or 2 bedroom units go in there, it might be a little smaller, but would not be any bigger. So that building's about 20,559 feet in size, which is roughly half an acre, but it's going to sit on 23 acres, which is about 1/45 of the land mass there. So it's a tiny, even though the building's not insignificant in size, it's tiny compared to this tract. And we have to keep in mind that we're dealing with ginormous, as my kids used to say when they were little, acreage here. One of the things that this project tries to do on both ends is to avoid sprawl and not spread out too much, which is why the density is trying to cluster it, particularly on the multifamily, to have more green area and keep the building consolidated. And the same with the manufacturing sites. They're fairly close together, but it provides a lot of green area as a result, rather than spreading out over the whole project. The goal at the end of the day that there'll be a single owner. This is not to be subdivided and sold off. It's not going to be condominiumized, but to have a single owner that would rent out long-term rentals on the multifamily buildings, and then have 90 manufactured housing units that can be bought for people that can afford them and want to have equity in their homes. So over the last couple of months, I've been saving newspaper articles in anticipation of coming before this board, and I'll just pick 3. And if I could just read them, it'll only take a minute. So this is the Sunday paper yesterday. And front page says, rising interest rates and home prices are strangling affordability. And they quote from the New Hampshire Housing Authority's CEO, it's strangling affordability, making home ownership increasingly out of reach. Higher housing costs are also complicating efforts to attract and retain workers, which is why we see help wanted signs all around, and you saw those today. At GI Plastique, between the 2 entrances, they have 2 signs, hiring now, sign-on bonus. They're desperate to get people, and they're Wolfeboro's biggest private employer. The biggest private employer that we have. They run 3 shifts there, and they need more help. So we're going to talk at some point about a hardship and an unnecessary hardship. And to me, the unnecessary hardship is we don't have enough housing. The article goes on to say that the frenzy for lower-priced homes is intense. In March, a 3-bedroom Cape-style home in Dunbarton hit the market. 160 people made an offer on it. And I'll jump to a Wolfeboro property. I'm the trustee of a trust. My clients have both died. They have a home in Birch Hill Estates. I listed it on Saturday, and it sold on Saturday. That fast. Things are coming on the market. Actually, didn't even hit the market. People in the development heard about it, and it just went out. It's how fast things are going. It says in New Hampshire, in March, of 23% fewer home sales have been finalized, and there's 19% fewer homes for sale than last year. The problem is, as another person says, inventory, inventory, inventory. So that's just one article. A second one, which would be shorter, is the Registry Review, a publication that you probably don't get, but all attorneys get it, most realtors get it. It comes out weekly, and it says in Q1 was a rough market for the New Hampshire housing market, and particularly keys in on Carroll County. It says Carroll County saw a 30% price jump. This is just in Q1. The bulk of the missing single-family sales was found in Carroll County, Grafton County, and Hillsborough County. 3 saw 197 home drop-off from last year, a 78% drop-off from the state over the last year numbers. And I won't keep reading the article, but the point's pretty clear. We need housing. We don't have enough of it, and there's a critical demand for it. We need to look really no further than this board at a recent hearing that you had in January on another project. Although the project didn't pass, everybody that spoke in favor or against it said we have a need for housing. I don't think that it's disputed, and it's in the public interest, which is one of the criteria on every single one of the variances, that we have affordable housing, reasonably priced housing. Regardless of what you call it, we need more of it because we just don't have enough. So I'd then like to just go to some of the pictures that are in your package. And again, I'll just do this once. But you had about 20 pictures that were all taken from a drone to show you what the neighborhood was like, to give you literally a bird's eye view. And the first picture I had is Winnipesaukee Lumber. Now, Winnipesaukee Lumber owns this property. The Quimby family owns this property. It's under agreement right now. They've sold off, obviously, Winnipesaukee Lumber, changed its name to Hancock Lumber, but they own these 92 acres in the back, which directly abutted Winnipesaukee Lumber. But this is their project. This is their development that they have. And look at the size of these buildings, the number of cars in the parking lot. This was just done on an arbitrary day. All of that is on 5 acres. We're proposing to do this project on 45 acres for the multifamily section. So you get all of that in 5 acres. The next project is what I call the Druid Building, which the Planning Board and I believe Zoning Board just approved. And it shows 2 new boat storage buildings, again, just to the left of this project. They're on 5 acres. Again, we are ginormous in comparison with 45 acres and 45 acres at 23, 23, 45. And there's the Goodhue Hawkins building. This board approved this building fairly recently. It's been put up. It's been a wonderful addition to Wolfeboro. We don't even know that it's there. And it's huge. 78,000 square feet, according to the town tax card. We can put the 2 multifamily dwelling units, the 45-unit buildings we are proposing, inside half of this. And we could put most of the manufactured housing units in the other half. Not all of them, but we can put a lot in there. My point is that this building is massive in scale compared to what we are proposing. And this is a direct neighbor to this property. And then there's a lot more storage units that you can see. And again, I'm just flipping through them quickly. And I know you've had the opportunity to read them, so I won't address everyone. There's a picture of Eastern Propane and GI Plastique. There's the Wickers building. That, by the way, is 18,000 square feet, roughly the same size as to one of these multifamily buildings. Again, a neighbor. We're not trying to build buildings that are bigger than others in the neighborhood that aren't already there. But that building, by the way, it's only on 5 acres. We're proposing to put multifamily building, roughly the same size, on 23 acres, 4 times bigger. And then, of course, the grandfather of them all is the GI Plastique building. That is massive. It's 90,000 square feet, and it's only on 6 acres. And again, we have 23 post-subdivision for these. And then there's the SAU building. Has 20 school buses, which leave in convoy at about 7:30 in the morning, and they come back. I won't hit the other buildings. They're self-explanatory, except this picture, which shows our property, which is 100% wooded. The only structure on it was that garage that you saw at the far end there, the Sugar Hill end. It's 100% wooded, not developed at all. So what we're asking for is variances to allow this project to go through. And with that, I'll get into the specific variances. Unless you want to say something now, or you set? So if they could just make one quick intro thing, and then we'll get into the variances. Is that okay? So this is my client.
Who is? Yeah,
Jordy.
of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, hi. Good evening, members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Jordy Hutchinson.
Could you talk closer to, or
Okay,
just move the mic?
yeah, sorry about that.
Because they need to get it for the TV, too.
My name is Jordy Hutchinson, and I was born at Huggins Hospital and have lived here most of my life. Just about everyone in town knows me. I understand the difficulty of your job and aim to make it relatively easy with our application. This project has significantly overwhelming benefits to the public that far outweigh any negatives. We, the developers, have met with almost every abutter and local groups such as the Heritage Commission, Conservation Commission, and the Lake Wentworth Watershed Association to explain our plan and to gain their input. Recently, your board was presented an application for another large project, which was ultimately denied. During the course of public testimony for that application, almost every person to speak recognized the need for housing in Wolfeboro. The 2019 Wolfeboro Master Plan has goals for both the generation of renewable energy and the creation of new and diverse housing stock. This application helps to achieve both of these goals. We strongly believe that each of our applications fully satisfies the statutory requirements to be granted these variances and ask the board to do just that. Thank you.
Okay, so to the substance of the application, number 5, which is the height variance. The ordinance says that we can have a 30-foot building. The midpoint height is about 40 on the paperwork that you got in the packet. The ridge line is about 49 feet, and you saw that we had a balloon test there, and they had one over the weekend. It actually was 2, and the balloon was set at 50 feet, and you could see barely where it was, but below tree line. And we got that idea from Goodhue Hawkins. Goodhue Hawkins similarly came in before this board and asked for a height variance. And for the first time that I was aware of, they did a balloon test. So that's where we got the idea. And this application for the height variance emulates the one that Goodhue Hawkins submitted. And I believe, Suzanne, you were the vice chair at the time on that. And so the application that Goodhue presented suggested there were 32 lots in the Pine Hill Road Development District, which is what we are in, and that they were the second largest. The largest is this project right here, that 45-acre piece in the development. And we provided a chart that suggested that everybody else was innocuous by comparison, 1-acre lots, 2-acre lots, 5, 6, but nobody was anywhere near as big as we are. And the criteria, the special condition that Goodhue Hawkins utilized was that it was the biggest property in the area, or one of the biggest, and it was really the only property that could handle that kind of a building, which again, this board approved. So we're trying to do the exact same thing. Now, their balloon test, they went up to 80 feet. And at 80 feet, you couldn't see anything. Couldn't see any abutter at 80 feet. Forget 60, 50. They went all the way up to 80 feet, and the abutters couldn't see it. So the point is that the extra 10 feet in height, the height that we're asking a variance for, is not going to be visible. And the board found that Goodhue met the public interest test because it was not going to have any impact on the abutters. They felt that it was not going to alter the essential character of the neighborhood. I'm just paraphrasing right out of this board's decision, that substantial justice would be done because there was no gain to the public by denying it. They didn't feel that the value of surrounding properties, of course, would go down because there were other similar buildings in the area, and we're saying the same thing. We're in a residential area as well as commercial, and that because it was one of the largest, it met that special condition. So they were given a height variance, and they're a direct neighbor. And they're on a big piece of property, which is why I think it was warranted. We are on a bigger piece of property. I think it is equally warranted for us. Another variance, height variance, that this board granted was Huggins Hospital. Huggins Hospital has 131,000 square feet on a much, much, much smaller footprint, and it is visible. We drive by Huggins every day. That building does not comply with it. And one of the people that complained and spoke against the height variance for Huggins Hospital said, I won't be able to see the sun until 10 o'clock in the morning. Despite that protestation, this board still approved the height variance. And we won't have that problem. There won't be a single neighbor that won't be able to see the sun because this building was 10 feet taller or 20 feet taller, whatever it may be. So we believe, like other buildings in town, that there will be no negative impact. And I was trying to think, what's the tallest building in Wolfeboro? I think that I'm standing in it. I think this building may be the tallest. It wouldn't be able to be built today if we complied with our 30-foot height requirement. It's a wonderful building. It's been here for 100 years. It has no negative impact whatsoever on the community. And if the town came in for variance, I think it would be appropriate that this building on a much, much smaller footprint with no buffering at all around it, zero buffering. We've got 45 acres of buffering, and you walk through woods and woods and woods to get there. So let me get into the specific criteria. Number one, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. It must unduly, in a marked degree, conflict with the ordinance. The question is, it must not unduly, in a marked degree, conflict with the ordinance, such that the variance violates the basic ordinance objective, and it cannot alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. Well, the purpose of the Pine Hill Road Development District is to protect the form and function of that corridor. And that corridor is a mixed corridor. We drove down it today. Got a lot of houses. Everything on the right side was houses. There's some on the left. We've got commercial property. We've got some industrial property. So the corridor is a multi-use corridor. And then you have to look at what is the particular reason that we have a height restriction in the first place. There's usually two reasons. One, fire. And at TRC, the fire chief suggested he was okay with the project provided that it had a fire suppression system inside the building, which it will because code will require that. The second reason that we generally have height restrictions is to prevent one structure from overshadowing an adjacent structure to prevent light and view shed diminution to an abutter. We don't have any abutters that will have any diminution whatsoever. They won't even be able to see these buildings, is our belief. We're 840 feet in from the road. You drive by, you wouldn't even know that it's there, again, like Harriman Hill, Taylor Community, or Harriman Hill. So for those reasons, we believe that the public interest would be served and will not in any way, it won't be contrary to the public interest, and by allowing us the extra density, we can actually serve the public interest better by providing more housing that is needed in the community, which clearly is not contrary to the public interest. The spirit of the ordinance is observed because, again, it will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Given the significant size of this property, the largest in the district, the small footprint that the building is going to have on this property, the natural buffering that is around it, the excess 10 feet in height will not be noticeable nor discernible to any of the neighbors, as was evidenced by the balloon test, which was higher than the peak. Number 3, the substantial justice will be done. The Board of Adjustment handbook suggests that any loss to the individual that is not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. Well, this will do substantial justice. Again, the benefit to the applicant is clear. We'll be able to get a third story basically on this building, much like Sugar Hill, by the way. That's a 3-story building, much bigger than these two buildings, and maybe bigger than both of them combined. But that extra 10 feet in height will not be detrimental to any of the neighbors. It's also located in the middle of 46 acres, have no impact on the general public, and therefore substantial justice will be done. We also don't believe that the extra 10 feet in height will have any impact on property values in the surrounding properties. We do have letters, which I'll submit in a minute, from a number of the abutters: Easton Propane, Hancock Lumber, Goodhue Hawkins, and one other that's escaping me. But anyway, I have the letters, and I'll submit them to you, suggesting that they don't believe that this would in any way cause a diminution in the value of any of their properties. We're also well protected such that there should be no diminution in value, and we also have 2 real estate agents who are the applicants that would testify themselves that this will have no diminution in value, and I don't believe we have any real estate agents in the tonight that'll contest that. And then finally, literal enforcement of the provisions would result in an unnecessary hardship because of special conditions of this property. And again, just employing what I'll call the Goodhue Hawkins test, they argue that because they were such a big property, they should be treated differently, and I agree. Large parcels should be treated differently. If this was on a small footprint, putting the Empire State Building on it would not be appropriate. But when you're out in the middle of nowhere, and this is a very remote site, even though it's got 4 accesses to Route 109, it's behind all of those commercial properties. You won't even really be able to see any of the buildings in this project at all after it's built. But because we're the largest in the area, that is a special condition. It's also uniquely remote, but nonetheless accessible, which is a good combination, again, much like Sugar Hill or Harriman Hill, because we wrap around. And owing to that special condition, there is no fair and substantial relationship that exists between the purposes and the specific application. Again, the goal is to protect viewshed. This will have no diminution on it. The goal is to protect for fire. No issues from the TRC on that end. So to deny it would frustrate the purpose of the ordinance, which is to provide affordable, reasonably priced housing, which the master plan supports as well. So the lot's uncharacteristically large in size. It's unique. It can support a taller building because of the buffering that it has. And again, if it was a smaller lot or in a different location, we would not be able to make that argument, but we can here. I also submitted this chart in your package, which showed all the acreages of all the properties, and you'll notice that we're the biggest at the bottom. Everybody else is much, much smaller, and that is absolutely a special condition because we're the only one that can claim that. And then finally, the proposed use is a reasonable one. The proposed use is residential, which is permitted in this district. It's multifamily, which is also permitted in this district. The extra height will not be visible to any of the neighbors, or if it is, it will not be discernible that there was an extra, story there. So we're respectfully requesting that you approve the height variance for the applicant. We believe we statutorily meet all the requirements, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions from the board?
One quick one. What is the total square footage of each building?
About 20,500 feet.
2,500?
20,500, give or take.
Total or each?
Footprint.
Footprint, total or each?
Each
Each
building is the
building.
same size. They're identical size.
So 20,000.
Yeah.
You pointed out some of the other buildings that were there.
Say again?
Some of the neighbors' buildings that were also large footprints. Are any of those exceeding the height variation that they had to get a variance for?
Goodhue, a neighbor right behind us, you know, that we showed you the building there,
How high is that one?
roughly the same height as this.
Thanks.
I'd like to reserve my questions further until after the public's had their input.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant, Luke or Sarah? No?
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Would anybody like to speak in favor of this application, this particular variance, the height variance?
Good evening, members of the zoning board. I'm Tony Fallon, architect at 49 Center. I am in favor in general of this type of project. I think it's a very good condition that they've suggested to allow for keeping it to a long-term lease, 12-month rentals, not short-term rentals. Mostly because the housing is very limited. You know, I'm on the board of an organization that staff and clients are, you know, having a hard time finding housing. I think as Randy pointed out, the quantity of land versus, you know, the built buildings is very unique. They're locking up a lot of land for you know, really conservation type of setting. They're not just doing a scatter shot across the whole lot. So I think that density warrants granting the variances. I'm very glad for this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in favor at this time for this variance?
Hello, my name is Cody Gray. I represent Goodhue and Hawkins Navy Yard real property and a butter to this proposed project. For the reasons mentioned by Attorney Walker, we support and approve this this project. We feel like the housing is important and does meet the substantial justification for the variances as listed in the docket today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the height variance? Anybody would like to speak against the height variance? I see none. Board, would you like to close the public hearing? Yes, Randy?
I'd always appreciate it if I could speak before the board closes it, but I did have the letters from abutters that were in favor. These are in favor of all 7 variances, so they go to any one packet, but if I could give those to the board.
Yes, if you could give, do we have these?
We have
Okay.
them.
They're already
Thank
in
you.
the package.
Yep,
You got
so they're
full
on
set.
record as being in the file. Yep.
There's both sides.
Microphone.
There are favor and there are those that are opposed. We also got.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to leave the impression that they're all in favor because there are
Those
some
are all in
opposed.
favor.
We got some from Tavis.
We don't have those.
These are the ones, you have copies of the ones I received. These are
Okay. Do you want to quickly just, these are all in favor, just quickly say who they're from,
Sure.
just for the record?
Sure, be happy to do that. So Goodhue Hawkins, and you heard from Cody this evening, Victor Druin, who has one of the boat storage buildings. All of these are direct abutters. And I note that the letters that were against were not from abutters. Hancock Lumber and Eastern Propane.
Thank you.
So did the board have any concerns that I could address?
I think for the record, you should notice the other names of the others that were sent in.
I think they're already in the record.
I know, but you've asked publicly those names to be read. I would like the others to be
Okay.
read as well.
Tavis, do you have that handy?
I don't have that packet in front of me
The
now.
ones that you handed out and left on our table tonight.
I understand. You guys have all the copies, so one of you will need to read the names.
We can do that. Just 1 minute here.
Got them right here. It's
Oh, thank you.
PSI Molded Plastics.
And they were in favor or against?
In support. LP Gas Equipment, Inc. owns the property. This is for the above referenced lots. We have reviewed an overview of the application for variances for the project and the proposed plan. This letter is to provide in support.
That would be
That's
Eastern Propane.
LP Gas Equipment.
Yep.
We have one letter against from Mitch Merrow and Sue Merrow, where they live at 239 Pine Hill Road. They're against the project. And that's it.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, there's one more from the Realtor, Adam Dow. In favor.
This is, actually, it's a discussion of criteria number 4 on all of the variances, maybe?
Say it again.
The letter from the real estate agent, Adam Dow. Was that not part of your material? Okay.
No.
That was an independent real estate assessment, apparently. Yes, we do. Yep. Anything else from the board to the applicant?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And to deliberate.
Okay.
I have a concern. I have a concern in that the ordinance 17595B says that, it tells the height permitted 30 feet, not including the appurtenances on the top and so forth. But it says, however, that no such structure shall exceed a maximum footprint of 144 square feet.
So that is referring to the appurtenant structure. Should only be 144 square feet or 12 by 12.
Okay.
And I'm familiar with that because that was put in there when I was employed here.
Okay. And then the other part of the ordinance, when you go to the purpose, too much paper. It wasn't read in full. The purpose of this district
Could you
is
please get into your microphone more so that it gets picked up by the video
Is that
recording?
better? The purpose of this district, it was not read in full. The purpose of this district is to protect the form and function of Pine Hill Corridor and to provide for businesses and office facilities, contractor facilities, and sales services associated with contractor facilities. Now, it wasn't long ago, the planning board went through this Pine Hill area and looked at what could be done to facilitate just that, to bring in services and sales and so forth. And this is counter to that. This is residential. So in my thought, the spirit of the ordinance would not be met.
Is residential permitted in that zone?
Oh, I lost my place. 175, what was it, 175? What was it, 175 what?
I'm afraid I don't know.
It's Article 15, Pine Hill Road Development District is 17593.
95B.
You just read that purpose.
95B talks about lot coverage, 40% maximum. Lot density shall not exceed, we'll be talking about that later. Permitted uses, one of the following. Dwelling use structures is permitted per lot, we'll be talking about that. That's the density and the use.
So residential is permitted.
Yeah, and then it goes on to say retail, lumberyard, sales, distribution, building supplies, storage facilities, self-storage. And that's why they did this whole, planning board did this whole look at that area. And it
That's
was
the new ordinance, correct? That
in the
you
contractor's yard, they wanted to get that in there.
Yep, right.
And the purpose was, just what I read, to include contractor's yard. It just seems, to my point of view, it's counter to what has just been tried to enhance.
Okay. Tim, do you have comments?
Nope, it was very clear.
I guess we need to,
Go through the 5 criteria.
right, but let's, if somebody has something in particular to say about the particular criteria in favor or against, just say that. And we don't need to have everybody commenting on everyone if they don't have, a specific separate reason, I think. So, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest because
Well,
Wolfeboro needs housing, and the spirit of the ordinance is observed because residential is an allowed use in that district.
well, it says it should not conflict with a proposed explicit or implicit purpose. And so I'm referring to the secondary part of that ordinance, which the planning board just recently worked on.
Does anybody else have anything to add to the first 2 criteria that are often spoken to together?
I have no issue with either one of them.
No issue being that you believe that it meets those 2 criteria?
Yes.
Okay. Sarah, do you have anything to add?
We're just talking about the first 2?
Yeah.
Yeah. I do note that in our ordinance, it does say that Pine Hill Road Development District was just put in March of 10th of 2020. So it is new.
I believe that the zoning in that district just got changed substantially in '22, and that's the handout that we got today of the zoning. Is that right?
No, I took it out of
Tavis?
this.
There was a number of changes in the Pine Hill zoning in 2022?
Correct.
Yes,
Well,
that was in that. Yep.
Yep.
So what difference does it make if it was 2020 or 2022?
Sarah just said that hers was 2020.
Yeah.
I was just referring to the handout we got.
The one thing I was pondering when we were just talking about the heights and all, it was pretty clear from observing the balloon and all that if you are in the neighborhood, will not be seeing the building. But then, if it's going to be that high a building, then I wonder what the people in the building are going to be seeing. And it just seems a little unfortunate that someone that isn't affluent would be subjected to looking at industrial warehouses if they live there.
Okay. Luke, do you have anything to say to 1 and 2?
I think that because of what the fire chief said, that he's comfortable with, I mean, we're concerned about, safety and the ability of fire services to be able to, reach and service the building. Fire chief's good with it. Building's going to be sprinkled. I think that is the only issue that I would see. If that wasn't fulfilled by the applicant, I think that it meets all the criteria just based on that fact, that it's safe. Fire chief said it's okay, it's going to be sprinkled. And ultimately, with height, what we care about is the ability for people to be able to be in a safe environment, that if there is a fire, they'll be able to be served by the fire department and be able to escape the building. And due to a sprinkler system, it meets that criteria for me.
Okay, let's go to substantial justice is done because, in my opinion, substantial justice is done. There's no detriment to the public, and the benefit to the project is that a lot less sensitive area is going to be disturbed because they can meet their density on a smaller footprint, and that means more height. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for them to meet the density that they're permitted on that lot without impacting quite a bit of wetlands. And I don't think that's a justice to them when there is no detriment to the public for a 10-foot height in the building difference. Because I don't think for the public anybody's going to have any notion that it is taller than 30 feet.
You see, the catch-22 here is that should the board allow the height variance, it therefore will allow at least one building, if not two. And that is the crux of the issue with the significant impact to that area in the traffic and so forth. So, as I said, at catch-22, you say yes to the height, you might as well have said yes to the development of the two buildings.
But the density allows the development of the two buildings. They're meeting their density, that's not a question.
That's another issue that will be taken up, density.
Not on this lot.
Oh, okay. Well, then, at any rate, I will still have to say that the impact from allowing this height will have an adverse effect on the neighborhood in that the impact to the neighborhood through the traffic and increased population.
Okay, Sarah?
I was just thinking about what Suzanne was just saying, and the density is not an issue only if they do that boundary line adjustment, right? If it was still one lot and it had the two buildings on it, that doesn't match up with 175-96A1.
If they leave the lot the way it is, it meets the density for the two buildings. If they split it exactly in half, each lot meets the density for one building. My understanding is that density is not a factor with this part of the project.
You see, that's the other catch-22. It's my understanding that you look at an application for what is, not what you wish it was, not what the developer thinks it may be. It's what they're asking for.
You need to speak in your microphone.
you look at what is being asked for, not what may be proposed. What we have in front of us is 2 buildings on 1 lot, not 2 buildings on 2 lots, or a building on each lot.
That's true without going into the argument you're making, but they're allowed to have 2 buildings on 1 lot.
But then it would be into the density issue.
No, it's not.
That's where the catch-22 is.
It's not into the density issue. Okay, you think it is, and I don't believe so. So, do you have anything to say about number 3?
I'd like to have some of Suzanne's questions about other people being able to see this building versus not being able to see the building. Topography-wise, is this property higher?
Tim, can you talk into your microphone, please? I can't hear you.
Is this property higher or lower than the surrounding, or is it pretty flat?
Higher, generally.
Substantially higher or
Define substantially.
50 feet?
I would defer to the balloon test. If no one saw the balloon, I would question whether somebody would see the building.
Perfect.
But
Thank you.
Do you have anything to add to substantial justice is done because?
I have no issue with that one. I think they meet the conditions.
Okay, you think they meet the conditions. And Luke, did you already answer that question? Okay. Number 4, the values of surrounding properties will not be diminished because I do not believe that the values of surrounding properties will be diminished. I think it meets that criteria.
I will say again what I usually say, the applicant has not submitted specific data that shows that. It's their obligation to prove it, so I think that we can't make a determination on that.
Okay, Sarah?
Well, I think that I have to agree, we have no expert testimony for either for or against, but it would be ironic if residential area buildings would have a detriment to industrial and commercial. And that's what's down there. It's not residential primarily in that area, so we have no expert testimony, but personally I think perhaps the residential would not be detrimental only because it's not, it's just a commercial industrial area with warehouses, huge warehouses, like Goodhue Hawkins.
Okay, and I don't have the actual paper for hardship if somebody else does. Luke, do you want to, thank you, do you want to address hardship specifically?
I can. I'll address the last one too. I think most national surveys of multifamily housing show that that well-maintained and well-managed multifamily housing is a benefit to surrounding property values, and in many that I've looked at, that is the case in most nationally. So I don't see that Wolfeboro would be any different in that respect. As to the hardship for the height variance, I think the applicant has met the height variance hardship test. I think by showing that, with these particular buildings and the design, and fitting them in an area where it is, it's beneficial to green space and maintaining the overall flow of the property, and by being able to go up 10 feet, which I don't think is a detriment to any of the surrounding businesses, it is mostly a business area. Therefore, there are no real abutters that are residential homes that would even be able to come close to seeing the space on the balloon test, and because we walked the property. So I think they do meet the hardship test in this respect.
Sarah, do you want to comment on hardship?
Nope.
Suzanne?
Well, It's been said that their lot is one of the largest, if not the largest, that there is in that area. And when I looked at the online maps, across the street is a larger lot than that lot. So I don't think that pertains. I would further say that there is still a reasonable use of that property. If it was 2 stories or 30 feet, they just wouldn't get as many units as they want, but that's not my purview. I feel that they could develop that in a different fashion and still provide for apartments.
We do have a letter from Adam Dow, a local realtor, and I'll summarize the last 2 paragraphs. It says, you will notice the number of single-family homes which have sold over $500,000 has risen from 23 to 47, and as a percentage, from 16.6 to 38.5. I think as a town, we are forgetting what it takes to purchase a home like that. This letter indicates that in order to buy that home for $500,000, a person would have to have a $100,000 salary. And there's a lot of people that don't have that here. Many people who do live in town today would not be able to do so if they did not already do so. The proposed developments will help fill a void in both rental housing and middle-class for-sale housing.
Okay, I guess I'll throw in my 2 cents on the hardship. I think because of the massive amount of wetlands on this lot, that the permitted density is hard to reach if you consider buildings with lesser floors. And I think this leaves more open space and the ability to have conservation aspects such as a solar field, which I think is something that's beneficial. And there is a part of the hardship that says that the cost to make this project needs to be, proportionate to the impact that it might have. And I think that, building 2 buildings with a really minor height variance, it makes sense, and I believe they do meet the hardship. Anybody else want to mention anything on any of the criteria?
Clear.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve case number 09V-22, public hearing for a variance under Article 15, Section 175, 95B of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to allow for a building height variance as submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I'd like to make an amendment to that. I noticed in the drawing that we don't actually have a construction drawing showing what the height of the building is and how that midpoint is figured. And in order for the zoning enforcement officer to include that in his building permit and for us to know what we're approving, I would like to have that submitted as a condition of this variance.
I'm good with that.
Audrey, can I just, are we going to have a discussion before we vote on this?
Microphone?
Are we having a discussion before we vote on this? Because it was in the application, it was going to be 40 feet.
That's right, but it's not shown in the drawing how they got to that number, and so I want it shown because if the grade were to change during construction...
That wasn't my point.
Oh, okay.
My point was I think 40 feet should be in the motion.
And did he not?
That's true. Yep.
And then it's verified by their drawings, et
Yes.
cetera.
Yep.
But unless I missed it, I didn't hear it's a foot measurement in the original motion.
I thought the applicant said 49 feet.
That's the peak. They're allowed to
Okay.
go to the midpoint. So are you asking to amend the motion to include the 40 feet?
Please.
Got that?
It's essentially what I wrote down. I said, Luke
Okay.
Frudenberg moved to approve 9V22 as submitted, and that was seconded. So as submitted would be 40 feet.
Then plus
But
a
there could be-
drawing. Yes.
I'm good with that
The
amendment.
drawing sort of goes without saying because they have to submit it to get a permit, so.
Yes, but I'd like it to be attached to the approval as well,
To the variance?
to the variance
Okay.
approval, yeah. It is? It's not on the one I've got.
And
Okay,
public hearing
great.
is closed.
Okay.
Oh. Okay. You are right. I
Well-
was looking at the gable ends.
Then, if you've got the number you'd like, then I'd like to amend the motion to say, per the plan as dated and received by the ZBA on May 2nd, the date that's on there.
Right. I'm looking, but I have a hard time seeing.
I think approving it as submitted suffices if the board is happy with the drawing that's in the application.
This is the plan we're using, this is the plan that will go to the planning board. Small plan.
I would like to list the date and the, whoever drew this, and I cannot read it.
Let me see, if I may. We have a date of 3/30/21, and was drawn by
Top right
Freeman,
corner.
Freeman French, Freeman, FFF, licensed architect, state of Vermont.
So these are just conceptual because these were done for another location, but they do prove the point for the height. So as long as the architects know that you're not using their work without permission.
So I'd like to vote on the amendment and then on the motion as amended.
Okay, we're voting on
The
the
amendment.
amendment of,
The heights that would
Okay.
be per that plan.
did we get a second on that amendment?
So are we
Second.
back to my request for an amendment for the 40 feet to be included in the motion? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you just second that?
Yes.
Thank you.
All in favor
Of the amendment,
of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
And all in favor for the height variance?
So the motion is Luke Frudenberg motion to approve 9V22 as submitted with a height limit of 40 feet with the amendment of the drawing that's in the packet.
Right. That covers my amendment, so does that sound,
the
Okay.
motion as amended.
all
I
right?
just read the
All in favor?
Aye.
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 opposed. And a roll call vote, please.
Luke?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Suzanne? Audrey's a yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to
10?
case F,
Number
10V22.
Ten is somewhere.
Next case is going to be Jordy Hutchinson, Michelle Hanson, Richard F. Quimby, Jr. Revocable Living Trust, off Pine Hill Road, tax map number 175-11, case number 10-V-22, public hearing for a variance under Article 22, 175-144A of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to allow for a variance for the number of units allowed per building. Formal submission was presented. Mr. Walker.
Thank you. I'll jump right in. Since we've already had an introduction, the next couple should be much faster from a presentation standpoint. So the goal here is to have 45 units in a single building. I'm proposing to put two buildings in the Pine River Road Development District, each having 45 units. The ordinance permits 5 per building. And the concept is simple, that we're trying to increase the density because it's more efficient for development. We've been doing this for years in Wolfeboro with our subdivision regulations, encouraging people to get away from the sprawl of having big lots and to consolidate and encourage clustering. And basically, this is just a cluster development in a building, the same concept. And the benefits of it are that there's less roads, less asphalt, less costs, it's more affordable, utility runs are shorter, there's more green space, better protect wetlands, to take off on a comment that Audrey made on the last application. And we're trying to do the same thing with this building. And when you put more units in a building, you have more efficiencies for heating and cooling, better insulated, particularly for internal units. You have a smaller footprint, and the ordinance simply hasn't caught up. And again, we're being crushed from a housing perspective, and we need to have more affordable housing, and one of the ways to do that is to allow more density in a building. And just to go backwards for a minute, but also going forward, Adam Dow, Realtor, did submit a letter, which you have in the file, that is supportive of every variance that we have submitted, in addition to the testimony that we'll present. But he also says, I believe that there will be a corresponding increase in property values if these projects come to fruition, as the surrounding neighborhood currently has some of the lowest property values in town. So anytime we deal with criteria 4, we've got Adam's letter in favor of it. So the only question is, we have a density, we can put 90 units on this 45 acres, or it's subdivided on 23.4 acres for each lot 1 and 2. So we meet the density. The only question is, do we put 90 units in 2 buildings, or do we put 5 units in a building which is compliant and have 18 buildings? Now, we could spread 18 buildings out over this property. I can tell you that that's not financially feasible, but legally we could do it according to the ordinance, and we're trying not to. We're trying to consolidate them into one building. And other examples of this, Taylor Community got some big buildings with way over 5 units in a building. Sugar Hill, I think, has 86 units on the top of its hill. The Wolfeboro Inn right downtown's got 44 rooms. So there's definitely other buildings that have this that, again, serve Wolfeboro wonderfully. So with that brief introduction, let me get into the criteria. First thing is that it's not the size of the building that's important. You saw from the pictures that we've got a number of ginormous buildings in the area. So putting 45 units in a single building like this, it's still quite small compared to GI Plastique, which is right next door, which is roughly 4.5 times the size of that building. The Goodhue Hawkins Boat Storage Building, similarly, about 4 times the size of that building. So not the size, it's just the number of units that we need this variance for in a single building. So for number 1, it says the variance will not be contrary to the public interest because, well, the public interest, as we know, will be served by providing reasonably priced housing. This will be rental housing, long-term rental housing. And how much rental housing does Wolfeboro do we have right now? 0. I went online last week on Craigslist to rent an apartment. And I couldn't find anything in the town of Wolfeboro. 0. Short-term rentals? Absolutely. You can Airbnb a lot. Nothing for long-term rentals. We're trying to put 90 long-term rentals in there. They will go like this. Now, there was one ad on Craigslist that you could get to, which was Harriman Hill. So you call up Harriman Hill, and you know what you get? You get on a waiting list. They don't have any availability. They are full because they do a good job, but they are full. So Wolfeboro has a demand, a strong demand, for long-term housing, and it's absolutely not going to be contrary to the public interest to provide this extra housing, and one of the ways to do it is to allow greater density in a building. And will this alter the essential character of the neighborhood? That's one of the tests. No, you won't even see it Again, we keep pointing out that you can't see this project. It's completely surrounded and buffered. And someone asked, what if you're looking out the windows rather than in? Well, then you get to see a lot of trees. 23 acres for Lot 1, 23 acres for Lot 2, or 45 acres for the package. It is green, 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 and it's, again, a big lot, and all the neighboring lots are 5 acres that have all these Winnipesaukee Lumber buildings on them. They almost have no buffers. So it would not be contrary to the public interest to approve this variance. Now, one of the reasons I think that we have a 5-unit limit per building is because the planning board didn't anticipate big properties like this. If you had a smaller property, let's specifically say 2.5 acres, and you had a density of 2 units per acre, you could have a 5-unit building on 2.5 acres and be compliant. But what if you've got a 10,000 acre piece of property? You can only have one 5-unit building on it? Doesn't quite make sense to do that. So it's really the density. We're compliant with it. So again, do we have 18 5-unit buildings, or do we have 2 45? You're going to get the same amount of units. It's just we're not going to spread them out. And that's why we're asking for a variance for you. Again, it's not the size of the building, it's what goes in it. Again, not contrary to the public interest. Is it in keeping with the spirit of the ordinance? Well, the spirit of the ordinance is basically to have aesthetically pleasing structures in your neighborhood. This will be one, in part, it's a very attractive building, but we don't think you'll be able to see it. It will not offend any of the neighbors' sensitivities because, again, they will not be able to see it. It's going to be invisible, like Taylor Community, like Sugar Hill, like Birch Hill Estates. They all exist, but we don't really know they're there. We drive by them all the time. You're going to drive by this one and not know that it's there. We're also one of the largest parcels in the district with a small footprint. A smaller footprint, again, allows more green area, less wetland impact, more natural buffering, good for the neighbors, and again, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, which is residential, which is commercial, which is industrial. The neighborhood, it's sort of a motley group, but well-defined there. Number 3, substantial justice is done because there's no particular benefit to deny this application. It's a balancing test that you employ, and the applicant clearly is going to be able to construct 2 buildings with a greater density on this property, so that's the benefit to the applicant, and there's no negative impact to the general public to deny it. Therefore, substantial justice will be done. The value surrounding properties, again, I'll go back to Adam Dow's letter, but you won't be able to see this. We had nobody speak against at the last variance that we just discussed on value, because value is not going to go down. If anything, it's going to improve the neighborhood by having needed residential neighborhood there. Concentrating in one location is also much better than spreading it out. That's another way not to diminish values. We have to spread it all out over the project, over the tract. It's going to have a detrimental impact on the property. It would be better and more efficient, and I think from a value standpoint, better as well to have it concentrated. So none of the surrounding property values will be diminished. The property is located well off Pine Street, and we have all the abutter letters that we've already submitted and others that were not abutters that are in favor of the project. And then finally, literal enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would not result in an unnecessary hardship because of special conditions. Special conditions is not going to change. Every variance that I talk about today is going to be the same special condition. We're the largest lot in the area. We were 5 acres in size, I wouldn't suggest this. Couldn't do it. Smaller lots, absolutely not. We've got 2 23-acre lots, or 1 46-acre lot, and that's a special condition which nobody else in the Pine Hill Road Development District can claim. We are the biggest, so we are absolutely unique by being number 1. So owing to those special conditions, is there a fair and substantial relationship that exists between whether you should enforce or not enforce that restriction? The answer is no. To give full effect to the ordinance, what's the downside to having extra units in a building that you're not going to be able to see? This was in a neighborhood, residential neighborhood. In your neighborhoods, you may not want a building this size right next to you. but when you're in the middle of a 23-acre tract, it's not going to have any impact on you whatsoever, and it would be frustrating the ordinance, in my opinion, to do that. So given the size of this project, the size of the land, I should say, the remoteness, the natural buffering of this parcel, there is no fair and substantial relationship that exists between the density restriction for the proposed buildings when applied to this specific piece of property. The purpose of that density restriction is to what? To protect abutting properties from overpowering buildings. This isn't going to overpower any of the neighbors. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's very remote on the Tuftonboro end of town. So because we have an uncharacteristically large piece of property, which is unique, we can support greater building density without any detriment to the neighbors or the general public, where smaller lots simply cannot. Again, if this is a smaller lot, would not make this argument. And then finally, the proposed use is a reasonable one because the proposed use is residential. We're in a residential zone. Also, multifamily is permitted in that zone, Suzanne. Section 175-96A and Section 175-144. So the area better protects the wetlands, more environmentally sound, requires less materials, less roads, less utilities. It is better for all of us. We therefore respectfully request that you approve the variance as submitted, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I have one question on splitting this piece of property. If what Audrey said is correct, that if it was one piece instead of two, you could do the 90 units.
Correct.
Why split it? What was the reasoning behind that?
Because the code enforcement officer denied a permit because he didn't read 144B and said that we needed to go in for variance. We're coming in for a variance for that. I think it was variance number 2, which is one of the ones when we get to the planning board, we won't need it.
Having said that, you have the option of actually doing that if you so choose.
Yes, I know, yes. And secondly, for financing purposes, we would prefer to have 2. It's better to have 2 for financing purposes.
Like I just said, you're allowed to have 2, but you don't have to have 2. I just wanted
Exactly.
to
We do
answer that.
plan on having 2. The plan that you have right here is the plan that we plan on submitting to the planning board, in which we already have discussed conceptually with them. Basically that same plan. We went through conceptual planning board and we thought we were favorably received.
I do have a question
Sure.
related to that, and that is, with the variances, as with the planning board approvals, they expire within 2 years unless there's unless you come back to the ZBA and for a reason, justifiable reason, those can be extended. So I've heard the owner saying that this is going to take some time to build out. And I guess I was just concerned that either the variances or the fact that these are potentially two different lots and therefore 2 different projects, it might cause an issue. I think there's an answer in there someplace.
You might have answered your own question there, but anytime that we get an approval, and again, we suggested 4 conditions, which you didn't put on the last one, which we were suggesting that you do, but you might put it on this one and any ones going forward. So once we get approval from this board, we're going right to the planning board, and then we plan on building. And once you get vested rights, you can continue on with the project and complete it. It won't be done overnight, a project of this size, but we believe once we have vested rights, we'll be all set and we'll go forward.
And that determination about whether you've reached that threshold of vested rights comes from someplace, some board or court, if it drags on for 15 years.
Yeah, there's a statute on it, but there's also a case called Piper versus Meredith, town of Meredith, about 40 years ago, that said once a developer had invested significant money, a little gray as to what that was, depending on the magnitude of the project, they could continue on and you couldn't take it away. So based on Piper versus Meredith and its progeny, we're confident that we'll be able to go forward with this project and we will get vested rights, but the main thing we need is this variance and one more tonight, and we go to the planning board, and then we can be off and running, hopefully.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
It's clear.
I have questions. All these units, considerable water and sewer, and I would like somebody to clarify for me exactly how it is these two necessary items are going to be addressed.
How are they going to be addressed?
Right. According to TRC, one of them said that they were going to have water that was town water. On the application, it says they were going to have town sewer, and then I have other information that might not be as clear-cut as it appears to be. And there was a rumor at one time that they were going to have septic on their lots because the lots are so big.
Right. I'll let Chris handle the technical part, but just to answer the question directly, we suggested 4 conditions. One of those conditions is that we tie into town water or sewer or have it be managed by the town so that we could qualify for those.
And when you say having the town manage it, does that mean that it's built by the developer?
I'll let Chris handle that, but
Okay.
I believe that the answer to your question is in the condition, that if we can't do that, then we don't go forward. We are presuming, and we have offered as a condition, that we will need to do those 2 things in order to go forward.
Well, I would explain the reason I bring this up on the contrary to the public interest part, which is the first question, is because currently and in the past, everyone that is a taxpayer pays for all of the improvements for water and sewer. Then the people that are ratepayers pay for essentially the operation. We have had a lot in the past, and you and I both know that I've been here 13 years as a selectman in the past, and things have come and gone. We've had moratoriums because of water and sewer and whatnot, and the public many times have found it barely palatable that their taxes, if they have no town water and no town sewer, they find it difficult to be generous to pay for those capital improvements for the small portion of town that does enjoy those benefits. Now, as is somewhat suggested, if the person that is the developer were to put in all of his sewer, get it all done, get it all paid for, and get it up to speed so that it is acceptable to the town, and the town would then just essentially operate it, that might be one thing. But if the town is going to have to add capacity to both of those entities, and there will be a survey this summer, I understand, especially for sewer, then I'm not sure it is in the public's interest.
Well, we did go to TRC, and Dave Ford did write a letter, which you have in your package.
I do.
And I believe that we're set on that, but again, that's one of the reasons we're suggesting that as a condition. And I will let Chris handle the specific details of that.
The last sentence is, this is a concept that would need further discussion with the appropriate board, so I don't think it's set yet.
So when you say...
Can you state your name, please?
I'm sorry. My name is Christopher Berry. I'm president and principal member of
Can you
Berry
pull a
Surveying and
microphone
Engineering.
closer, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So when you say you have municipal sewer, what that means is that you have a collection system that goes down to a sewage treatment plant and is then infiltrated into the ground. And so we've investigated how to tie into that system with Dave Ford. And what we've determined is that to do that, we would have to add additional capacity to that rapid infiltration system. And or we would have to apply a treatment system to our sewage load to then give it to the town of Wolfeboro. What Dave and I have sort of worked out from an engineering standpoint conceptually is if the developer installs the treatment system and the sewage collection system, the pumping systems that are required, and the effluent disposal areas that are required on site, constructs those as part of the project, that the town would then own and operate those systems so that there would be no capital expense to the town. It would reduce the amount of sewage load that this project, it would remove the sewage load that this project would place on the existing sewage treatment system that they have, and allow for the municipality to own and control a large sewer discharge system.
And how would that lessen the amount of sewage that comes from your place that's then sent to the town facility?
It's not sent to the town at that point. It's sent to our own on-site.
Okay.
At that point, the town's on-site sewage disposal system. In essence, if we were to add flow or load to the municipal system, the town system, an additional effluent disposal system would have to be put online at the town.
Indeed, and the one we have now is still a pilot program.
That's right. So the idea is we're not going to send you the load. We're just going to build the system that would handle this project on our site, and it would be municipally run.
That's clarification I was looking for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Audrey? For the benefit of the public, could we please read into the record this memo that just came in today from David Ford? In his words.
We could, but it is in the file.
You know what?
Speaking to the microphone.
The public doesn't go to the file. This would be for the public to hear tonight, in Ford's words.
This is dated May 2nd? Is it dated May 2nd?
Yeah, it came in today,
Yeah.
yes.
Would you like to read that?
Sure.
Thank you.
May 2nd, 2022, to Jordy Hutchinson, Chris Berry, James Pinio, Tavis Austin, the Planning Board, from David Ford. Pine Hill Community proposed 180 units. I attended the TRC meeting on the proposal development on April 6, 2020, and reviewed the concept plan sent to me by you on March 11, 2022. As discussed in previous TRC meetings, the town has concerns about supplying municipal water and sewer to multi-unit projects. See my attached January 7, 2022 memo on this subject. In 2022, the town has undertaken a long-term study of water and sewer demands, current and future, so that the Board of Selectmen can make long-term decisions as to allocation of municipal water and sewer. The perceived need for housing in Wolfeboro has been discussed in the master plan and throughout the community this year. The cost for building new housing units continues to rise, and the lack of affordable rental units leaves no place for the workforce to live. In order to make multi-unit housing feasible in Wolfeboro in 2022, there will need to be some innovative planning. Regarding your specific project, our discussion revolved around the town supplying municipal water and the long-term plan for connecting our 12-inch water main on Filterbed Road with this project in Pine Hill Road. Your consultant was going to calculate the water demand for this project, but our initial calculations indicate that the town had adequate water supply to supply this to this project. However, sewer would be an issue. Sewage from this project would have to be pumped a long distance to the municipal treatment plant, and the economics just don't make sense. Also, we have concerns with limitations on the municipal sewage side. I brought up the innovative idea to support this project as requested density. The concept is as follows. The developer would design and build an on-site septic system for the project in accordance with the New Hampshire DES standards and obtain a groundwater discharge permit. This would require the development to perform a high-intensity soil map and test pits in favorable locations. The town would agree to taking over the long-term responsibility for the maintenance of the septic system, in effect making the municipal system allowing the higher density. This is a concept that would need further discussion with the appropriate boards. David Ford.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I do. The letter just said it's to the consultant. Your consultant was going to calculate the water demand for this project, but then David goes on to say, but our initial calculations indicate that the town had adequate water. By any chance, did you give David that calculation?
No, we did on-site soil calculations for effluent disposal on-site. We have not gotten into flow calculations for the fire service that would be required for the building, but Dave is confident that the pressure inside the system itself is adequate, and certainly a 12-inch line to the site is adequate for volume.
Can I ask you a quick question? Did the test pits already?
No, we haven't done on-site test pitting, but we have done on-the-ground on-site soil testing, as well as remote GIS work to know what type of soils that we'll be utilizing on site. And then these tests, as time goes on and planning processes continue, we would do additional on-site soil testing, HIS mapping or site-specific soil mapping, as Dave has pointed out, and then refine all of those calculations.
Okay, so those 4 dark gray rectangles over there,
Yes.
those are just kind of sort of projected 4,000 square feet spots and not the exact ones?
So those are not 4,000 square foot lots. You're confusing that with a subdivision rule of 4.
That was me. I was confusing that with, I thought those were the 4,000 square foot footprints.
So those are, what I've done is I've calculated the size of the EDAs, the effluent disposal areas, that would be required for each
You know,
of the
a
uses.
nice little explanation of those 3 letters would have been very helpful on that map.
Understood.
Okay,
So we've chosen those locations for a number of different reasons. Soil capacity, for one, proper setbacks from different soil groups, another, setbacks from abutting boundary lines for a third, and then nitrate setbacks for the last.
So at this point, those are projected, but they won't be confirmed until the rest of the soil test pits and all that are done, correct?
That's right. We still have a large amount of engineering work to do before this project moves forward to the planning board.
Thank you.
Yep.
Would anybody like to speak in favor or against this particular variance? Any other questions for the applicant? Applicant would like to have something to say.
I always ask this before you close the hearing. If there are any concerns that we didn't address, I'd like to address them. And Suzanne, you brought up something about a cupola and 144 feet after the hearing was closed, and I didn't have an opportunity to respond as to why that wasn't relevant. So if there's any concerns that anybody has, I'd be happy to try to address them now if I missed something.
Sometimes those concerns come when we have a dialogue going on.
Understand, and it would be nice if the board may open up the hearing after that if something new comes up. But
Chair does not like doing that.
I agree. That's why I'm asking the question now. But just to say one last thing on Dave Ford's letter, since there was some discussion on that, I think the thrust of Dave Ford's letter can be taken from these 3 sentences. The perceived need for housing in Wolfeboro has been discussed in the master plan and is supported by the master plan and throughout the community this year. The cost for building new housing units continues to rise, and the lack of affordable rental units leaves no place for the workforce to live. If you approve this project, I mentioned it in the materials somewhere, but I didn't say it tonight in the presentation, that if you work for GI Plastique, they'll be able to say, you can walk to work, just walk through the woods, walk down Filter Bed Road, walk through the trails. Same with Winnipesaukee Lumber or the SAU district. A lot of these people can just walk to work if we can put these houses where we're trying to because of the commercial properties that are right around it. And Dave is clearly supportive of that because I think the town's having the same issues getting town employees here. They don't have a place to live. In my office, we have 3 of our 12 staff that live in Ossipee. They would love to live in Wolfeboro. They cannot find any place that's affordable here. Can't do it, so they live in another town. This kind of project makes it more available to everybody.
Well, then I do have a question for you.
Sure.
Those folks that are working at GI Plastic and Winnipesaukee Lumber Yard, are they going to earn enough per hour to buy one of those apartments or to purchase one of those manufactured homes?
So one of the nice benefits...
What's the cost going to be to the consumer?
Well, we don't know that until we get the full cost.
I think you would know a general idea of what that is to calculate what it's going to cost you to build out.
I don't know, but I'll say two things. One, that we're trying to provide two different types of housing. One, long-term rental housing for those that just can rent, and somebody that may have a little bit more money, they can buy their own home, can get equity by buying one of the manufactured housing units in the project that we're going to get to in a minute. So we're trying to provide two different types of housing at two different levels for two different categories of people that come in. The exact numbers, I don't know, unless you want to try to jump in, but we don't know that number.
You say equity. You don't get equity in an apartment building, and manufactured housing doesn't get equity. They decrease in value.
No, because just like anybody else, your house depreciates, my house may depreciate, but you can maintain it. And as you presumptively, people will get a mortgage, they'll pay it down, and the equity in that house goes up.
I really don't think that's correct. I mean, I know the real estate market's changed in the last 2 years, but manufactured housing is like a car. As soon as you drive it off the lot, it depreciates.
All right, so let me...
Well, if you would like to come up with some figures for that in our area, I would like to know that. I can say that Birch Hill, which you've referred to, is a co-op, so they own some of that land, and that's why they get some equity.
So let me go back to that one example. So my client bought that, a home...
In Birch Hill.
In Birch Hill. I'm going to say around 1990, maybe for $100,000. That's going to go for $250,000, I think. It's gone up in value.
But that's not just the manufactured home. It's because they're a co-op.
Well, you still pay the fee every month for the underlying land, which is the same concept.
I think this might come up in the next variance criteria, which might actually be another day, but it would be really important to have some backup for that claim with regard to that.
All right. Well, for this one, we're trying to get 45 units
right
in a building.
There's actually a sign right at the entrance of Birch Hill that says it's an owner community.
Yep, it is.
Oh,
Can we finish off this one? And because we do have a
we're
lot to talk
multi-family.
about on the other variance requests that deal specifically
I'll
with that.
reserve my
Thank you.
counter-argument about Birch Hill Estates till we get into the
Okay.
manufactured housing.
Any more
So
on this one?
any other questions for the applicant on this variance?
Thank you.
Okay. Any motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. 5 criteria. Who wants to go?
Don't everybody jump at once.
I'll do one.
Okay.
The only way I would think that this would not be contrary to the public interest is if they handle their own sewage as proposed by Chris here to us tonight and through information in Dave Ford's letter, and we know that that is not a done deal on the town level. And so I would surely say that we ought to have it as a condition, as a condition, but I'm not quite happy with the way it's listed as number 3 on these proposed 4. But I think with a good condition that it wouldn't be contrary to public interest, but without that, I think it would be, because I think the costs to all the taxpayers would be greater than any benefit they would get.
Suzanne?
Because the people that would be living in these apartments and eventually in the manufactured homes are not taxpayers. They're renters.
Suzanne?
Yeah, the spirit of the ordinance. Again, I firmly feel that it will change and alter the character of the neighborhood, and that it could threaten public health, safety, or welfare. And I think, although I could address it further down, I think that it's premature. I don't think I can call it scattered, but premature in that relating to what Sarah said. David Ford is undergoing a whole study on this, and it will be done during the summer. We don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. Given the years that he has preached about the problems with water and sewer, I don't expect something marvelous to come out of it. So I think that this, as well as the other, is a burden on the infrastructure of the town, and it's premature.
Tim, do you have comments on the first two criteria?
Well, I think when you look at what the master plan says, they're looking for additional housing. I have no issue with this thing. It's sitting in the middle of a bunch of industrial complexes, and it's going to give us the workforce that we need. How many places do you go to now where they're only open 3 or 4 days a week because they can't find people? This might help solve that.
Luke?
I agree with Tim, and just to piggyback off that, I mean, from what Attorney Walker said, you know, as long as you can't see it from the road, it seems that that's the going thing in Wolfeboro, so I support it as well.
And I agree with Tim, but I also want to add, for the record, my opinion that this board, when looking at a variance that does not include a density increase, is not the appropriate board to review water and sewer or other infrastructure or town services. Without a density increase, those are allowed by right by a homeowner or anybody else that wants to build in town. It is a density increase, if that's asked for, that adds the extra burden that this board reviews. So I don't believe that it would be contrary to the public interest, and and the spirit of the ordinance is observed with this project, with having them condense it into 2 buildings instead of many buildings. And I could go ahead and finish my sentence because it goes under the substantial justice. There's no benefit to applying the full weight of this ordinance on this project because it is, it's not, the 5 units per building is partially to mirror the New England scale of our neighborhoods and our street fronts, and this just isn't seen, doesn't impact that at all. And I think that's it's a benefit to the project to build it like this, and there's no detriment to the public to build them in 2 buildings instead of 18. Okay, so I went into the substantial justice, so if anybody wants to comment on that one.
I'd like to comment on what you said about not talking or placing too much weight on water and sewer.
If there's no density request.
Well, let's just talk about what the purpose of zoning is. It is, according to 674-14, to lessen congestion in streets, to secure safety and fire, to promote health and general welfare, to provide adequate light and air, to prevent overcrowding of land, to avoid undue concentration of population, to facilitate adequate provisions for transportation, solid waste facilities, water, sewer, and so forth, and to assure proper natural resources and so forth. So that's the purpose of zoning, and I think we have every right to weigh in on that, as I did, and I will continue to do.
I'm not telling you not to, I'm just telling you my opinion on that. I have to say that the purpose of zoning that you just read is carried out through the ordinances that have been written. So unless something extra is being approved, that those elements are embodied in the rules that we already have.
Yes, they are. That's why we talk about them.
Right.
And that's why I asked to have Mr. Ford's letter read. And that's why I said I feel that we are premature in allowing this until that study's done.
We obviously disagree on how we approach this, so I think there's 2 very kind of valid opinions on that. So let's continue on with the criteria. Sarah, do you want to say anything about substantial justice?
No. I think I think it's a balancing act, and I'm not sure if we're balancing it. I have nothing against the extra housing. I just think that we need to make certain that this is going to be, it's not being called affordable, but it's supposed to be for workers. I think if we're going to make it for workers, that we should make sure that the conditions they're living in are as nice as everyone else's. I'm a little concerned about people on the third floor seeing nothing but metal roofs of warehouses all around it, because it isn't, because the very thing that they are tooting here about how it's not visible from the street means they aren't going to see the residential units that are up on the street. All they are going to be seeing is these big, huge warehouses down in the back. And that's a little bit unfortunate. And if they can take care of this water and sewer, and I would certainly not vote for it if something significant wasn't in there as a condition for that, then I don't know if substantial justice is being done.
Okay, the values.
Substantial justice?
What? We were just talking about that.
Yeah, I didn't weigh in on that.
Oh, okay, go ahead. I thought you had.
Well, very simple. I would just say that the request is not consistent with the surrounding area. That's an industrial area, which overweighs the residential portion of that area. That's all.
Values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. Anybody have an opinion on that?
Can revert back to Adam Dow's comments,
Okay.
which we've already gone over.
Any other comment?
No, we have no testimony from the applicant that it does or does not benefit or detract from the neighborhood.
She is? Sabette, are you talking? Oh, there you are. We probably need you mic'd or a little bit louder in order to hear you.
I'll try to talk loudly. Can you hear me? Or can I just talk to Kat?
She's coming out of the speaker.
Okay, apparently you're coming out of the speaker, so we'll give it a try.
I wanted to make a quick response to Sarah's comment, and that is that I think that substantial justice is done to offer people the opportunity to choose on their own whether or not they want to rent an apartment that looks out over properties like that. I don't think that's our call to decide aesthetically in this situation that it shouldn't happen just because we don't like the aesthetics. So that would just be my one point, that I feel like that's going to be a fair market situation. And the developer runs that risk of not renting those apartments or those units because maybe they're not attractive to people.
Thank you. Nice to see you, by the way.
Nice to see you.
Anything else for number 4? No. Okay, hardship. I think my piece on hardship is very similar to the one for the previous variance. There's no fair and substantial relationship between applying the full weight of the ordinance to this property. And because there's lots of wetlands, it's better to condense the allowed density, which is what they're building, to a smaller area to allow for conservation and other natural areas to be left there. Spreading it out not just increases the building footprint, it increases the roadways, the runoff, and a lot of other negative impacts. So I believe the hardship is in the property in that sense that would allow for this variance to be approved. Suzanne.
Well, given that we don't have the specifics on the high-intensity soil studies, how much prime wetland or wetland we keep hearing 100 acres, 100 acres. There isn't going to be 100 acres to build on. If I had a better handle on what could be built on, maybe I could make a better decision, but I don't have that, so I'm at a loss.
So you don't believe the hardship has been met?
Nope.
Okay, Sarah?
I think some of the wetland areas can be a special condition for the lot, and I'm still really mystified as to how they came up with that proposed boundary line adjustment, but it definitely, I have to agree that it definitely is better to have a smaller footprint because of all the wetlands in that area.
Luke?
Piggyback off everything and add to it, I think larger buildings are great. I think you condense save the green space for outdoor activities. Big buildings are better. It's just it's more economical. It's more functional. I think the residents are going to get more utilities and more access to things being in larger buildings. And I think big buildings are great for Wolfeboro. I want to see more of them, so fully support it.
Tim?
I have to agree with everybody, what they said. I think the two buildings are better. And when you look at things like how close you are to wetlands and all that, if we turn around and say yes to it, but yet they can't, the wetlands people say no, it kills the project. So I think we're ahead of ourselves on that particular one there. Two buildings are fine. Dog parks, walking trails, all kinds of things to minimize the impact on that piece of property. I think they've met their hardship.
Any other comments, or I would entertain a motion?
Can I ask Sarah a question? Sarah, if I made a motion and added in the fact that, because you're really concerned about this number 3, which is the subject to the applicant obtaining municipal water and sewer, that's kind of your main, and the burden on the town, is that correct?
Right.
Would you feel comfortable if there was a hard enough condition that would alleviate the town of any responsibility in order to?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah had a concern with that. Could you tell us?
Yeah, well, I think if we just made a condition that they were able to satisfy the requirements on site for their sewer, regardless of whether they run it or whether the town runs it, they'd have to, in order to even build it, DES is going to be very exacting about it, as they would be if the town was. But if they had a condition on there that said that it would not put a higher sewage load onto the town's system, I'd feel much more comfortable with that.
So you're saying that the project would have to qualify for having water and sewer on site?
I was mostly concerned about sewer.
Sewer.
Right.
Okay, sewer.
Right, and that's partly because it does seem to be a little premature to be making a decision on a lot of units when we're right on the cusp of doing a study. And I know, maybe it was Randy, somebody was saying about, it's the chicken and the egg, which comes first, whether we go to the planning board here as an applicant first or whether we go to the ZBA first. And some of these decisions are so contingent upon what the other board does. So I think if we had a condition on here that they would have essentially their own little sewage treatment plant on site, run by the town, if that's what it turns out to be. But I'm just concerned about adding the extra flow from both projects, both the apartments and all of the manufactured homes, to a sewage treatment system in the town that is still on a pilot program, can barely handle now.
So an amendment, something like, subject to the applicant obtaining municipal water, and that the applicant provides for adequate sewer, sewer disposal on site.
Or you could just say that, obtaining municipal water and that the applicant produces no extra burden on the town with regards to sewer. Or something like that.
Yeah, we want to make sure that they have an approved system on site,
On site.
which the ES would be very involved with.
All right, I'm going to try and make an amendment that the applicant,
We don't have a motion yet, do we?
I'm trying to make it,
Oh,
I'm trying to make an
okay.
amendment.
No, a motion. We haven't had a motion
No,
yet.
I thought you were going to make, I thought you made a motion, sorry.
No, you didn't make a motion, Luke.
I asked you, yeah.
No, we were just discussing what my concern was and how we could
Okay,
address that in a motion.
okay. So somebody's got to make a motion on the applicant.
Right, I thought
I
I
thought
thought
he was-
Luke was working on
I
that.
thought he was.
I was working on it, but now I don't know exactly what, so I'm going to make a motion that, and then we can add an amendment. Okay, how about that? I'm going to make a motion, and this is case 11, right? Yeah.
10V22.
10V
10V22, okay, yep. I'm going to make a motion to approve tax map 175-11, case number 10-V-22. This is a public hearing for a variance under Article 22, Section 175, 144A of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to allow for the variance of number of units per building, and
I
that's
think
to
that's
approve.
23, I'm sorry.
23.
Article 23.
23, sorry. And then Suzanne, if you want to now,
Your
if
system.
I get a second, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Now Suzanne, I guess if you want to make the,
And I'll make an amendment to that motion, subject to the applicant obtaining municipal water and managing sewer for the project on site.
I'll second that, Suzanne.
All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. And all in favor of the main motion?
Aye.
Aye.
No,
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. It being 9:30, let's dive into these last three variances. I think if we can mostly bat around our concerns and questions about them, perhaps, and then continue until next month for a decision on them, as the board would like to not be here until a late hour.
What's that, midnight?
Yes. We were looking at 10. I think in the interest of time, we should be able to get all our questions out in case we need answers back for whatever time that takes, and then we'll see how confusing it gets.
So the next one, depending on how that one goes, we may not need the next four.
Next two.
Which one are we doing next?
Doing 11V22.
11?
Yep.
Okay.
That's the density.
what one?
11V22 is interesting.
That's the density one, right?
It's a density, but I have some questions about, because what happens now is we go into the conservation subdivision section of the zoning, which we weren't in for all these other ones.
Can we do that at the next meeting? Did we have to, did we skip over?
Yes, and I'm trying to explain that.
Oh, okay.
So the other two are for more than one dwelling on a lot. One is for the residential district, and one is for the manufactured housing district. And I am not sure, under the conservation subdivision section, that the planning board doesn't have the ability to determine whether they're going to do sites or lots. If they have the ability to determine whether they're going to do sites or lots, I'm going to look at these other two differently, because they have a lot of discretion with sizes of lots, where they are on the lot. Their job is to figure out how to get these on that conservation subdivision site in a way that conserves, the site. And I don't want to overstep my variances onto their process. Does this make sense? Now, you have written sites in all of your paperwork, whereas I'm not sure that that is, in fact, proper. You haven't written lots because you would like sites. I don't know whether town planner, conservation subdivision, they can make lots virtually any size they want. They can make them very small, as long as they have 10-foot side and rear and 30 feet in front, which I think is what you show here. So the question is, you would like sites on one parcel. The other option is to have each site be a separate lot. And you're asking for us to put sites on one lot, whereas I'm not sure that I don't have enough information to decide whether that's a very good decision or not. So I'm trying to determine how much the planning board has authority over in order to produce this, instead of us putting our variance on them, which is going to lock them into something that maybe isn't as good as they could have if we didn't do that.
Would that be a question for our council?
It would be.
Would that not be the better way to do that?
It could be.
Well, I would like to suggest that we think about doing that.
I think we should, but I also have other questions. So, yep. Well, let's see what town planner says.
March 22nd, 2022, from Town Council. Your ordinance requires that the manufactured homes be on individual lots, and that those lots have to comply with the minimum lot size. So 45 acres equals 45 lots equals 45 units, because you can only have one single-family home on a lot. But you also have the requirement that all subdivisions be conservation subdivisions unless they are deemed exempt, and it doesn't look like they would fall into any of those exemptions. So this has to be done as a conservation subdivision and in compliance with that density limit, or they need a variance.
Did we get that letter?
No, you didn't ask the question.
Well, somebody asked the question, if you got the
answer. He was bright enough to ask the question, but now we're getting the answer, and so...
Yes, I had to ask the question in order to evaluate the application to deny the building permit to get us here tonight.
Going that way, you're asking for a variance for density. If you were doing the conservation subdivision density, you would be going through the calculations, and you have asked for a variance from that process. As this board, I would want that information in order to approve a variance for a density increase, because I don't know what the calculation shows that you may have. And I have to start with what you may have in order to determine what I could possibly increase the density to. And secondly, the density is largely dependent on how this gets laid out. And as the ZBA, we don't have all this information. So to ask for a density increase, even if I knew what your calculation was, I would need to know that I wasn't providing a density that there's no way that the planning board could even get on this site.
Because we don't have the land information as to soils and
so the
area.
Yes, and the threshold issue is,
that's built.
Are we going to, are we going to have a density increase, but are we going to have sites or are we going to have lots? and I don't know the answer to that.
I had read in there somewhere, I think the lot site was 50 by 100. So if you approved 90 lots or sites,
Where did you read that?
it was in one of the letters that came through.
Right, this was a site,
Yeah.
their site size is
Let me
50
finish
by
my
100.
question. So
Yep.
let's say you turn around and said, okay, this is great. And then the town says, no, you have to do a subdivision, and they're going to be individual lots, and each one's a quarter of an acre or a half an acre. You're not going to be, you're going to
Right,
be
but
approving
they're
something
not,
that can't fit.
because the conservation subdivision section allows the planning board to make very small lots. They don't have to stay with that half acre or quarter acre. They
I'll
can
ask the
make
town
whatever
planner.
they think is appropriate.
In your recollection, have you ever approved 50 by 100 lots in this town?
Well, I have technically, I've never approved any lot in
The
this
answer's
town. But I'm not aware of the,
All right, Tim.
I am not
Answer my
aware
question.
of the planning board having the authority to go down to 50 by 100.
Thank you.
But those are parcels, not sites. And I will say to this board, for whatever information it's worth, the planning board, I will say, is generally concerned that the manufactured housing overlay does not play well with the conservation subdivision.
It's
But-
interesting because when you look at what this applies to, it does not apply to the manufactured housing overlay district, but it does apply to the residential district. And then we've got this issue, but it's there, it applies.
Correct.
You
So
know,
a question I never answered for anyone was, is this project technically a subdivision? And the answer is no. But then the variance for,
well, I think that question needs to be asked to our attorney, because we have this other attorney that says it is.
this one?
Yes.
I don't know why this attorney, AKA the applicant, is calling it a subdivision.
Well, I think he wrote it in his, would you like to speak to this application?
Sure.
Knowing that we have some confusion and concerns.
The confusion
Should I
is
read it first
definitely the-
so
Oh,
that
why
we open it?
would you mind reading
Yeah.
this? So we're going to open this case.
All right, next case. Jordy Hutchinson, Michelle Hanson, Richard F. Quimby Jr., Revocable Living Trust off Pine Hill Road, tax map 161-15 and 16. Case number 11-V-22, public hearing for a variance under Article 24, 175-152B of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to allow for a variance for permitted density. Formal submission was made. Mr. Walker, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So an application was made for a permit for 90 manufactured housing sites on that property, and it was denied. And the reason that it was denied, we were sent to, this section of the ordinance, so we applied for a variance because we were denied. And so my read of subdivision, it's in the ordinance, section 174, no, I get it. 174.3 says the definition, the division, I should say, of the lot, blah, 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 or sites is a subdivision. So my read was always that you could sell lots, but you couldn't sell sites. And if you have a subdivision, you could sell off lot 1, lot 2, but in Birchill Estates, you can't sell the land underneath your home. You're just on a site. In Roby's Campground or the Willybrook Campground, which this board, I think, approved within the last year or so, you approve sites. They can't, it's all one parcel, one contiguous parcel that's got various sites on it, because the definition of site falls into subdivision. Therefore, it is a subdivision, which is why I applied for it. And you're trying to talk me out of having a subdivision, and I'd love this not to be a subdivision and just say, hey, this is what we want to do. Now, we did go to the planning board already. We gave them that exact design. They were comfortable with that design. My read of it was just conceptual. And Suzanne, I know, was at the hearing. She maybe can speak if she had a different impression, but they didn't tell us to get any variances. It was, this is what we think we can do. So they weren't trying to step on the ZBA's toes, but we would love for this board to conclude that we don't need to be here as long as the planning board approves it, which is one of the conditions that I suggested, by the way, the 4 conditions that we have volunteered. You've now adopted one of them. That said, it's conditioned upon the planning board approving, that. So if the board is of the mindset that we don't need a variance and that the planning board has jurisdiction over that, it's fine with us, because I think we'll get approval from the planning board for that.
And I think that we would want that from our attorney, because that's essentially the question I'm asking. I think as much leeway as the planning board has in this conservation subdivision, we should let them, we don't want to tie them in any way to what they think is right for this parcel, because they're going to be getting all the information. They're going to be the ones that are getting down in the detail of this parcel. So
the one issue, if I could just jump in, let's presume that that's the case. We still have a density problem. Forget the concept of whether it's a subdivision or not. We do have a density problem. We've indicated in the variance that we can't meet this conservation subdivision. I thought Tavis did an excellent job summarizing it, that the conservation subdivision does not work well with manufactured housing parts. It's not really designed for it. And the word site, I mentioned in the application, it only appears once in the ordinance. It doesn't ever get developed. It's sort of get left out there, which is why this board is here to sort of work some of the kinks out of the armor. So it's been our determination that we can't meet the rigid, I will say, restrictions in the residential zone, basically 1 acre or only having one house on a parcel. We've got.
But with the conservation subdivision.
Yes, but the more restrictive regulation applies.
No, actually, this says if conservation subdivision speaks to it, it overrides everything. If it doesn't speak to it, then the most strictest apply. And that's one sentence that I really paid attention to, because if it speaks to it, then it has even more leeway over the restrictions in the overlay district and in the residential district. But let me just ask you, you said you don't think you can make your density, you're quite sure. So you've done the numbers, removing all the areas that you're required to remove in order to get your net density?
So we've done enough calculations to know that we can't get 90. What that answer is, I don't know. But I know that if we just fly in that, get down that road, we can't comply with it. Now, one of the points that I make, however, is if we did multifamily in there, which we could, we would meet the density. And we're sort of asking, well, if we could do multifamily, why can't we do manufactured housing sites at the same density? The other problem that we run into is this is in a residential zone. Residential zone, has been tiered. Wolfeboro is very good about tiering what you can do. And if you have town water, you can do this. Town water and sewer, you can do more than this. Should go up. And because we're in the residential zone, it contemplates that the only thing that we're going to have is town water. We're contemplating town water and sewer. Well, if you have town water and sewer in Wolfeboro, you're not in the residential district at all. You're in the village residential, which allows 180 units on that property. And it's the category that we're sort of caught in, which is why we're asking for a variance on that density. There's other ways to get to this 90 if we did multifamily or if we were in the VR zone, but we're not in the VR zone only because they didn't contemplate us being able to get town sewer. If we had town sewer, we'd be in the VR and we wouldn't be here.
Well, isn't that entirely the purpose of the conservation subdivision ordinance, is to concentrate your population so that if you have a lot that has a lot of restrictions, you're not building all over it? I mean, that is the purpose and why you're required to actually go to this section.
Well, it's also making sure you don't calculate land you can't build on anyway in the density of the lot.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So if it's calculating land that you can't or shouldn't build on, how are we going to even give a density increase with the spread out, with one single family dwellings essentially instead of apartment buildings?
So the conservation subdivision does permit flexibility, creativity, innovation. It uses all those words, efficiency. But then when you get down to the density section, you get into basically you're forced into the HIS analysis. When we get into the HIS analysis, then we're not compliant from that perspective, which is why we're asking for the variance.
Well, why don't you explain to us what the HIS analysis is?
High-intensity soil survey.
I know that, but I want him to explain what that means.
To this project.
Well, just generally.
So basically, you back out roads, wetlands, steep slopes, those kind of things, and we start with 45 acres on those, that project. And if you could do 2 units per acre, you'd have the 90. But when you back out those things under that test, we can't. If we're in the village residential district, we could, because you can have 4 times that with municipal water and sewer, which is why I think we qualify for the variance.
So you can build on roads, steep slope, and wetlands in the village residential? No, you can't. So you're backing out stuff you can't build on anyway.
Yeah, but the density is twice. You can get down in the village residential district, you can get down to quarter-acre lots. So even if we did back things out, if we were in that district, we'd have a much better shot of getting the 90. So even if you have to back it out, it's on my application on the introduction.
Yeah, I wish I had the section in front of me.
The second page, but it's page 185 of the zoning ordinance, which is the village residential district.
I would love to go to a page number, but we don't have page numbers.
What's the number? 175 what?
I think you're going to find it in 175-69B.
$179.69 or $175.69? I'm sorry.
Yep.
It's 175.69B.
I think so.
Do you have
It
the
says each
new
additional
one?
dwelling unit 10,890 square feet.
Exactly, which is a quarter acre.
69.
So if we were in that zone, we could, I believe we'd probably be compliant. It's still an unknown, but I've suggested in the application for the variance so we could get it maybe up to 180 units.
What does the conservation subdivision require in the village residential district for?
I don't know if it applies. I don't know if there's anything in village residential large enough to qualify for conservation subdivision.
Yeah, because it's town water
So we
and
got a
sewer, you
tangle.
wouldn't need it at all. I think you're not going to find it because the village district contemplates town water and sewer, which we're saying we have as one of our conditions, and therefore, we don't need to do any high-intensity soil study. Because you have town water and sewer. Town sewer, what do you do with high-intensity
Right, but you
soil
still
study?
can't build in wetlands or setbacks,
Correct.
which
never
is
do
one
that.
of the purposes for that study, is it not?
I think one of the bigger conflicts I've heard from applicants is that it requires you not only to take out the sensitive lands, which makes sense, but it makes you, after you subtract that, you have to take out 20% of the rest for roads. So there's no ability to do innovative roadways or other.
So
So
I
it's
guess,
an artificially high
Right.
subtraction.
I guess I feel like with the information and the expertise of the planning board in the conservation subdivision, then perhaps a density bonus based on information we have for them and seeing where that wiggle room is, if it's the 20% for the roads or whatever, but we still have the site and the lot question, and then I would still want to know what is the permissible amount before I was to give a density bonus for any reason. And so that calculation would have to be provided.
Yeah, we don't have that calculation.
Be fairly easy to
We don't know
get.
what we have for density. Not yet. But we just know that if we back that out, we can't get this
Right.
unless we,
So,
They can
I mean, I'm not even sure that you asked for, well, you did ask for 90 units, but, what is that more than you're allowed? It's just, you can go up and kick your attorney to the side and make a point.
One point that I'd like to make is that the 20% reduction or calculation for roadways is really far in excess of what we'll have. We only have about 3,500 feet of roadway
Right.
on a 45-acre.
So those are the kinds of information pieces that we would need to base a variance on.
Great.
Right?
which we were trying not to provide for purpose of expediency.
Didn't happen. You have 10 minutes.
But if it was village residential and it was town water and sewer, again, that requirement goes away, and we really could be considered in that district.
Except
And
for
if it
your
was
town
multifamily-
sewer is taking up space.
It is taking up space.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't this be considered multifamily?
I don't know why you wouldn't ask for a variance for multifamily.
Okay, so why wouldn't? Okay, that's what I'm asking.
I mean, you could ask for a variance for anything, but, I mean, you,
Why couldn't we consider this project multifamily?
because it's not a multifamily structure, they're single-family dwellings.
Okay.
Sorry.
But if it was.
You could mix.
But if it was, then the multifamily section would apply, which supersedes the density and allows 2 units per acre. So if we did put multifamily there, we would be compliant. So therefore, we're
There you
asking
go.
you to just allow us to do it in a different form.
That's fine, give us
That's
the
the
information so that we can assess how much we're giving away.
You wouldn't be giving anything away. It's the same if it was multifamily. That's the point.
It's not, because the coverage on the lot with the impact is the difference. Just like the reasoning I gave for allowing the variances or giving the variances on your other lot, those are the same reasons that I would struggle with using so much of this lot without knowing how much is really appropriate.
So what are you suggesting we do?
I would like to know how much under your required conservation subdivision, how many units that you can get, and where you think you can put more units that isn't detrimental to the property. And like, how many would that be then?
One second.
And whether they're sites or lots, where we got that question coming, right?
Well, if you look at the definition of subdivision, it doesn't matter if it's a plat, tract, site, lot, et cetera.
That's right, but there's subdivisions in uses that allow sites like campgrounds, but this is not a campground, so I need to know, I mean, it's not telling us which one is appropriate for
Correct, and by the
what we're
same
doing.
token, I think one could read the
Sabette? Yep.
Well, I think there is a very important distinction as to whether it's a site or a lot. I mean, my understanding about the difference between the two is you don't own a site, you do own a lot. And the manufactured housing overlay district refers to individually owned lots rather than site. And so that becomes something that has to be discussed.
Yes, that's the other variance. There's the variance for the residential that says the same thing, and then there's a variance for the manufactured overlay district that says the same thing. So those two variances all hinge on the same information that I'm kind of trying to get.
So our suggestion is let's continue this to the next meeting, and we'll try to come back with more information. If we can't get that information in a timely fashion, we'll ask that you move it to the next one. And we might try to go to the planning board on the gap to see if we need you at all.
I love that.
Me too.
Would it be better just to continue it to July in case you can't get to the planning board and everything in between?
Well, my suggestion, let's do it to your next meeting, and we'll give you a
We'll see.
heads up before the meeting whether we like another continuance.
Okay.
We obviously want to move along.
I'd like to give the applicant a heads up. I can't attend the next meeting, and if you would like the same board, we should go to July.
Thank you for that. Doesn't matter to us. We know you're all level-headed and do a good job, and have your flak jackets on every time you come up here.
Okay, so do we,
I'd make a motion to continue case, is this right?
All the cases.
all three cases.
All right, what ones?
It's 11 v. 22.
I don't think you could continue until you open public hearings.
Oh, we haven't done that yet? They've been talking an awful lot for not having a
No,
public.
you're referring to others beyond this one. So
Oh,
technically, you can only
right.
continue a public hearing to a date certain.
Okay.
So open them all, continue them. All the other remaining variances, we'd just like to continue.
Even this number 5, which, I made a really good argument for, but you shot me down, that one? Okay,
What we have left is 11, 7, 8, and 5.
that's right. Can we do a consent agenda and open all 4 of those at the same time?
Why not?
Sure.
Okay.
I can even suggest that there was a motion to open for the purpose of continuing,
Yes, thank you.
if that would be made.
It would be wonderful. And somebody seconds that motion?
Second.
And who's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining.
Abstain.
Aye.
So that was,
4 yeses and 1 abstain.
who was the abstain?
Me, Sarah.
So the motion was made by Suzanne and seconded by,
Seconded by me.
who made it?
Motion made by Chair.
I can't make a motion.
I guess it was me.
Chair.
Chair doesn't usually motion,
I
but
think
I'd
I
be
said-
happy
It's okay.
to.
I think
Nothing
I said
special about the
so
chair.
moved.
Okay.
So Audrey motioned, Suzanne Ryan seconded, to open for the purpose of continuing 5, 7, 8, and 11V22 continued to the June meeting.
June, date, time,
Yep.
place.
What would the date be?
First Tuesday in June.
June
The
6th.
place will be here,
Ooh,
the
I think-
time will be 7, but I don't know what the date.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that part. June's, oh, my birthday, that'll be fun.
June 6th.
June what?
6th.
You're going to miss the cake.
I'm not going to be here. Screw you. I'm not baking a cake.
So,
All in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We all did it. We are, yeah, yes, Sarah abstained. We are still in session
Thank you.
unless somebody would like a motion to
You know the
close
pens
this
that have the little
hearing.
rubber
I
thing
make
on
a
the end of
motion
them
to adjourn.
No, you have to close the public hearing first.
Probably in my car.
Make a motion to
No, we
close the
continued
public
it.
hearing?
We continued it.
Oh, we continued it. I make a, somebody like it,
I made a motion to adjourn.
Oh,
all in
Thank you.
favor?
thanks.
Aye.
Aye.
I like this one, too.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
I already said aye.